right, good evening. I would like to
Recording in progress.
I would like to call to order the April 14th, 2026 school board meeting. Can we have the roll call, please, Patty?
Absolutely. Jennifer Shump.
Here.
Pip Clues.
Here.
Stephen Adler.
Here.
Byron Maddow.
Here.
Brian French.
Here.
Lisa Rappaport.
Here.
Nancy Kleberg.
Here.
Tish Campbell.
Here.
Lee Hudson.
Is he on Zoom yet?
I don't see him just yet. Eric Moore.
Here.
Nathan Delaney.
Okay. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any announcements or recognitions from anyone? Steve and then Pip?
I just wanted to thank, both Jen Shump and I had a chance to visit all the schools the past week, and all the principals were phenomenal. I mean, they each took an hour or more to take us around the schools, to just show us their programs. The amount of pride that was demonstrated was phenomenal, and it just, for me, was just a really wonderful reinforcement for why it's so exciting to be part of the Portsmouth school system.
Yeah, and I feel like each leader in the building wore many different hats, and it was just very apparent that we have some incredible, talented leaders in our schools.
Really awesome to hear. Other announcements?
Looks like
Depends on whether I can load Parent Square.
I'm trying to get my summary up.
Lisa?
Yeah, Pip.
Pip, go ahead.
I had the opportunity to go to the first robotics competition a couple of weeks ago and watch our team, the Wire Clippers, compete, which was really fun. And they did really well. They made it to the finals, and then they came in fourth. So that was excellent. And then actually one of our PHS students who's on that team also won a first leadership award, and will be placed into a group of finalists nationally to win that award on a national level as well. So, and her name is Kirthi Subramanian. So we're waiting to hear whether she makes it all the way to the national award as well.
That is fantastic. Anyone else?
Couple quick things. So we had 16 PHS seniors who qualified as NHIAA scholar athletes. So it's a statewide recognition of students who are varsity athletes, maintain really high academic excellence, and have some type of role in the community. And so to have 16 seniors recognized in that regard was a real feather in the cap for the high school in general, and then for the athletics program as well. I don't know if anyone made it out to the Little League Open this weekend, but again, another great opening opportunity with some performing by some of our kids to kick off that ceremony. And then we also had a team that was in from Portsmouth High School that presented at the Institute for Global Learning's National Conference in Atlanta, and were recognized for some of the work that we're doing in the 9th grade Global Leadership Initiative and the 4-way global pathway that has been developed at the high school. So it was nice to have those folks and the work that they've been doing, which has been diligent. We've talked about it over the last couple of years a few times. We've had some kind of on the fringes of what some of that work has been as part of more global conversations about the high school. But it might be good for at some point for us to bring some of those folks back in to talk about in detail how they are creating this really enriching and academically challenging pathway for students to be engaged in a whole bunch of different ways over the course of their high school careers in global education. That's curricular, that's project-based. It's also, of course, all the cool opportunities that we have that are not present at all high schools to go on global exchanges or to host students as part of global exchanges. And those are all part of this particular program and pathway, with students then presenting kind of a capstone project at the end, and those happen in the spring. And they're really amazing when you see what these kids have done. So anyways, kudos to this was several staff members who were connected with this work that were presenting at this conference as part of it. So kudos to them.
That is fantastic. Any other announcements? All right. Before we get to our consent agenda, I would like to make a motion to seal the minutes from our non-public.
So
Have
moved.
a second? Second?
Second?
And we need to do a roll call because, is Lee on Zoom yet?
Yes, he is.
Okay, can we
Do
do
you
a roll
have a-
call vote, please?
You gotta do a time frame on how long you're gonna seal it for.
We do?
Yes.
What is our standard? Do we do 10 years? and
10
then we
years, yep.
Revisit it? Okay. Amend the motion to seal the minutes for 10 years.
Second.
Okay. Can we get a roll call vote on that, please?
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. We now have public comment followed by a public hearing specific to open enrollment. So if there's anyone present who would like to speak to open enrollment, hold off on that piece. If you'd like to comment on anyone else, you're welcome to come up and do so at this time.
We didn't do consent agenda.
Oh, I'm so
Consent
sorry.
agenda.
I'm on allergy medicines today. My apologies. Consent agenda,
She's doing her.
sorry, no.
I'll make the
Lisa?
motion, I would make a motion to approve, March 24th non-public and regular minutes.
Second.
Tish, thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you, with my apologies. Now, public comment. If anyone is present who would like to speak, please come up to the microphone, state your name, and you have 3 minutes. I'm not seeing anyone yet. Is anyone on Zoom for public comment?
Nope.
Okay. We will now open the public hearing on open enrollment. If anyone in the room would like to speak to open enrollment, you are welcome to come up and do so. Do we have anyone on Zoom with a hand raised for that?
No.
Then I will close the public hearing on open enrollment. Next up is our superintendent's report.
Great. So the first of the items for this evening for me is the business administrator search update, and I'm going to have Dan Alexander, who's helping lead that search, just give us a quick update.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been accepting applications for about a month now. I did send an email out to all the candidates earlier today that we will be starting that process soon. I met with the team, which encompasses school district staff as well as 2 folks from the city side to help interview. We met to kind of review a survey today that was sent to all of our committee members on what they're looking for in qualities in the next business administrator, as well as asking the superintendent to kind of give his feedback as what he's looking for. We are targeting to bring candidates in after school vacation, and resumes will go out to committee members to review prior to school vacation at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
CTE director search, the last 2 days, the committee's been interviewing candidates. We will be deliberating later this week and make determinations based on that initial round of interviews, where we're going process-wise. If we think if we're in a place that we're pretty definitive about, then we might be in a position where we would be coming back to you soon with a candidate, and depending on that deliberation, we could entertain additional steps. But the committee will be deliberating the next couple of days, and then I'll be in contact with board leadership about whether or not we would be advancing a candidate for your consideration.
Thank you. And then we have the memo on overnight field trips and the school board email summary in the packet.
Yep. And then you have two notifications of folks who will be leaving us at year's end. One is a letter of resignation from Kate Fitzpatrick, who's a high school English teacher. And then the other is from Michael Winters, who has served in a couple of different roles in the district, but most recently over the last several years has worked at the high school as a counselor within special education, servicing students with IEP needs connected to counseling services. So both of those folks will be missed, and both have made significant impacts on the district, and I know that I will miss them both personally.
Thank you. Next, under old business, I would like to make a motion related to open enrollment. I'm going to read out the motion and then we can have a discussion about it. The motion is to recommend that the City Council designate Portsmouth High School as an open enrollment school pursuant to New Hampshire RSA 194D with an enrollment limitation continuing to allow 100% of all its eligible resident students and 100% of non-resident students eligible through the area agreement with SAU 50 to attend, and to allow all other admitted non-resident students to make up no more than 0.2% of the total enrollment in the Portsmouth School District, or up to 20 students, whichever is lower, and further to limit the number of its resident students who may attend open enrollment schools located outside the district to no more than 0.05% of the total enrollment in the Portsmouth School District. Can I have a second on that mouthful?
Second.
Thank you. So I'd like to open this up for discussion, but before I call on anyone, I just want to give a little bit of background to everyone, just to make sure we're on the same page with this. But essentially, at this point in time, Senate Bill 101 on open enrollment has been moving through in Concord. It seems somewhat likely to reach the governor and somewhat likely to be approved in some form. What this would effectively do is mean, if it passes, that any student in any school district in New Hampshire can attend any public school in any district anywhere in the state, even if it's not their home district. So there are a lot of logistical and financial and equity concerns around the way that this is being proposed in Concord. There's no additional funding coming from the state. There's no clarity around timelines for when students could come or go from districts. There's not a lot of clarity around how special education would function, who would pay the bill, who would transport kids. With all that said, we recognize that there might be, in some unique circumstances for individual families, potentially a desire for a few people to have this option for whatever reason. Maybe one parent works in another community and wants to be able to take their child to school in that community, so we don't want to 100% shut it down, but we wanted to be able to, as a general approach, keep it as minimal as possible, at least until we have a clearer picture of how it will work, how we can budget for it, how we can staff for it, and how we can plan for it. So that is why the numbers are very low at this time. And then I think once we have a better picture, we may be back again to take another look at this. And the process, because there is a 2009 law on the books around open enrollment that lays out in statute a very specific process for approving open enrollment, and they have a set of rules if you take your budget to the voters on warrant articles for how it unfolds, and then a set of rules for how you have to do it if you are like Portsmouth with a school board that then would go to the city council for your budget. So we would make this recommendation, and then it would go to the city council, where they would have to have a public hearing at the council level in a series of 3 meetings, and then they would ultimately have to approve our recommendation or not approve it if they don't wish to do so. They would also have the ability at the council level to amend it if they so desire. But our role is to make a recommendation to them on what we'd like them to consider, and then it's their role to take it up from there. So with all that mouthful, I'd love to open it up for questions and discussions. I see Pip, and then Tish, and then Nancy, and then we'll, Jen, okay. Go ahead, Pip.
I'm, as you know from policy discussions, I'm very much in favor of having this motion pass and passing it on to the city council. I just have one question about the language in here, which is that the first, in the motion, the first sentence says Portsmouth High School, and then the rest of it refers to the district in terms of who would be leaving the district. So is the open enrollment only relevant to the high school?
Sorry, go ahead.
Are the numbers of, when we talk about total enrollment, is that only in the high school as well, or is that in the whole district?
So what we are saying is that we will allow the high school to receive a certain number of students, up to 0.2% or 20. And then throughout the whole district, we would allow up to 0.05% to leave.
Okay.
So we're not receiving students at our elementaries or our middle school with the way this is worded. We are only receiving them at the high school, but we are allowing a small number of families to make a choice to move their students somewhere else if they wish to do so. And it's worded that way because we believe we have some amount of capacity at the high school, but certainly after redistricting, we have no capacity at the at the elementary school and not much at the middle school. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. Okay, thank you.
And there's been a lot of lawyering in the wording, so I know it's an awkward mouthful of a sentence, but this is how we were advised to phrase it.
Okay, no, I understand now. Thank you. Makes sense.
And I think we had Tish, and then Nancy, and then Jen.
So my question is, the bill that's in front of the state right now has no limitations on what school districts can put into our rules. Like, they're not going to come back and say, no, you can't do that. You can't limit.
At this second, to the best of my knowledge, which may or may not be current given it's Concord, I would say there are no prohibitions on the way we have drafted this motion. It could change. I think that almost in any scenario, there's likely to be some amount of legal action in a variety of directions because this is a vast unknown and a huge amount of change across the state. So we know that by passing it right now, like there's no law in the books right now that hasn't passed. So we're doing it in compliance with the old 2009 law that empowers school districts to make this determination. It's possible that the final version that reaches the governor might differ from what we do in a way where we have to revisit it, and if that happens, we certainly can. But we're trying to get ahead of it because there have been several cases in Concord where things have been passed effective immediately when the governor signs it, and that could put us in a position potentially where it's, say, I don't know, June 28th, and suddenly we're an open enrollment district, and if we have nothing on the books, then I think it could be even more chaotic and unpredictable. So we're trying to put some parameters around it. We may have to revisit them.
Okay, thanks.
Is that
That answers my question. Thank
fair?
you.
Nancy, and then I think I saw another hand, Byron, after Jen. So
yeah.
Nancy, go ahead.
Are other school districts doing a similar motion, do we know?
So this, there are 11 or 12 other communities around the state that have a similar governance structure to us that have to go through this type of a process if they want to consider open enrollment. And this very much is in parallel with what Nashua did. And their board has approved a similar motion, and it has yet to be approved by their aldermen, but it's going there for consideration. There are many districts that had warrant articles that had a variety of approaches. Many districts initially were doing in the warrant articles basically no students leave, no students come in an attempt to have that predictability for their enrollment and, you know, maybe to take a beat and be able to understand better how it's going to work. Other communities would look at it and say, we have more room in elementary, so we're only going to allow people to come in our elementary schools, but our high school doesn't have capacity. So they definitely pick and choose based on the district circumstances, which schools have space, what are their community needs, what area agreements do they have. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces, but I would say, yes, there are some districts that have done something very similar to this, and there are other districts that have gone in other directions. So I don't know if that really answers it in a specific way, but Jen and then Byron?
Pip actually asked my question, so we're good.
Oh, okay. Byron?
My question is, maybe it's in the 2009 law, but there's just looking for clarification on like the process for individuals to apply to come in and go out and timing and those sorts of things. Is there, I mean, maybe there's a general answer here, which is it's undefined or, yeah.
I'm laughing on the inside right now because there is no process.
Yeah.
That's part of the challenge with this legislation at this time. So there has been some discussion about following something similar to the process used by charter schools. So if a family makes a decision as
Just like a
Portsmouth
hand
family.
wave, it'll work like charter schools, kind of.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's been changing by the day
Yeah.
at this point in the session, so I don't want to speak to exactly what the parameters are right now. But I would say that throughout the legislative session, the general consensus of school districts from all over the state has been there's not enough clarity around many pieces. Like, would it be like your health insurance where there's an open enrollment period where you have to choose and then you have to stay for a year? It doesn't have that right now. I mean, maybe they'll add something like that. There's been a lot of questions that have been raised, and it's possible some of those will be addressed, but I don't know right now. I mean, it's part of the challenge. So,
And depending on what happens to the legislation, what is the date of kind of, activation of expectation for us to, I think right now, some of the default conversation is fall 28, but it could be sooner. And we would need to build, I think to answer your question, we would this intersecting with whatever the heck comes out of Concord, we would need to build some type of procedure. For example, with, who are we letting in if we have more than 20 students, how do we make those choices? So those are all procedures we would need to build.
yeah, there'll definitely be more to come on that. We do have a policy that we are considering, I don't remember if it's in the packet for tonight, is it, Pip? That is for second reading, that would look at us having our superintendent define what capacity we have throughout the district annually. And so that would certainly be something that we would have as a way of justifying and clarifying where we think we have space and the ability to let students come in. So that's one piece of it, and most other school districts are doing that as well. But yeah, as far as how it works operationally, we have no real clarity around that at this time, and we're not sure if the law will give us a specific set of rules or procedures that we need to follow, or if it will be more, we direct you to deal with this type of instructions.
Correct. Hard to tell.
We could not say. I don't know if there's more questions. So I would say then let us put it to a roll call vote, please.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Clayberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow.
Yes.
Passed.
Thank you. Okay, so next up, we have a conversation I was hoping not to have, but we are going to consider and approve potentially recommended budget cuts for fiscal 26 and fiscal 27, which we are doing in response to the 1.57 million assessment from School Care, which is the insurance risk pool for our teachers, and to manage a 26% increase in the premiums for School Care next year. So we had an ask from the City Council when they decided to pay that 1.57 million assessment to School Care. They agreed to pay it under protest, and they asked city departments, including the schools, to look for ways to find unencumbered funds, unspent money from fiscal 2026, the current year, that we could potentially set aside at this point to help pay those bills, and to look for ways to trim our budget for fiscal 2027 to also help with that. And because we already passed our fiscal 2027 budget, we have brought it back to the board tonight so that we can take a vote on the proposed cuts. And I would just say that this has been an incredibly difficult process for our staff, for all of our principals, for all of our teachers, for all of our administrative team. And nobody wants to be here, but we do have to do our best to deal with this in the most responsible way possible for our city and for our taxpayers. So with that editorializing, I will turn it over to Zach to walk us through what we are proposing to cut from the budget.
Great, and I know folks were part of this, most folks were part of this conversation last night. We had a robust conversation with City Council in previewing what those reductions were going to look like. Is there? Can we add me as a panelist, maybe?
Yes,
I don't
we
think
can.
okay, and I apologize. We're going to have just so I can show you that stuff back up on the screen again as a review, because I know a few folks weren't with us last night. So, little
You go to
impromptu.
the top of the, actually, do you want to send me the
Send it to you?
presentation? It's
Perfect,
easier.
that'd be great.
Sorry.
Yep, nope, that's great.
We're having technical difficulties for a moment, but we'd like to get the slides up on the screen. so
No,
that
we
everyone
didn't,
can
the
see.
final version,
It's okay.
give me just a second, was not embedded in the agenda because we did use it last night as part of the process.
Was it in the council agenda? No.
All right. Sorry.
You sent out a version on the 13th.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have the email copy of it.
Yeah.
I think he's trying to pull up the slides.
I got it right now. Yeah, I'm sending it to you.
Yep.
That's what we have.
Yep.
I got an email on whatever day.
I apologize. The board apologizes for Patty to have to improv a little bit. But it's the same material we showed last night to the council and the public. And Patty's slide 12.
12.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Awesome.
right.
It's this one, FY26 spending reductions. So, I'll just to review last night, and you can see the materials we shared with City Council and shared with the public as part of last night's broadcast, but just as a review in 26. So 26 is our current operating year, and these were the reductions in descending order. Of things that we're going to hold off. These are things that we had budgeted for through the last budget cycle and are now holding back on. Some of those things are because they've come back in a situation where we didn't have to spend as much as we thought we would have to spend in a certain area. Others are because we are making decisions to hold back on certain things in order to hit the request from the city, which was for us across the 2 years, 26 and 27, to be somewhere between $800,000 and $900,000 in the proposal that we were offering. So you'll see in this again, the big one. I want to make sure I give a thank you to our friends in the associations of Portsmouth teachers. This doesn't change our contractual obligations to staff. We have to budget for 1/3 of all every year. 1/3 of all staff members to take a course at the contractual rate that we would reimburse at, as they would if you take a course to move up their credentials or to get a degree or get additional skills. They have the ability to take a course, and that we would reimburse for that course. They also, because we budget for 1/3, they have the ability to come back and ask to say, hey, I'd like to take a second or a third course inside of the same fiscal year. We don't have lots and lots of those people, but we have some. And so the district has a discretion to say, well, whether or not we have the ability to offer a second and third course. And we're going to hold at what we've got which is the one course for the upcoming year. But I will say that was I definitely had some consultation with APT leadership, and they understood and I think endorsed that this made sense to be a way that we could help contribute to helping offset the impact of the city for the decision that the council made to go ahead and make sure that we were securing health insurance for our folks in light of the conflict that we were having with school care. We also have had projected savings from some of our elementary out-of-district tuition from what we had budgeted from what we had expected during the last budget cycle. We have a portion of the position which was the high school curriculum coordinator, which is the position that was Shay St. Laurent, who then left us during the summer. And so we're giving back a portion of those funds as part of these savings. Some of those savings were utilized in other ways to offset some costs with folks over the course of this year, but the remainder of it we're giving back. Out-of-district special education contracted services, similar to what I said last night, with some of those elementary tuitions not happening. There's also some service stuff that we're not needing to do, and some renegotiation we did with service providers to get cheaper rates. The IT position, the city a year ago set up a IT position that is a security position for the city, and then charged each of the charter departments a portion of that particular role. That role is yet to be hired. So as of yesterday, this is a fair prorated kind of give back to the district, because it's a service that has not been provided up to this point. One that the city understands that we were going to put in as part of our process. Several of the other lines are things that we are not going to, we did not have to spend at the same rate that we initially had budgeted for. So the CO teacher stipends line is a line where if people move tracks as a result of they get more coursework and they're going to slide over in the course of a year, we have to budget to anticipate that might happen. We're spending less than what we needed in that line, so we're giving back that line. District software, some of that has been picked up by within IT with the repurposing of funds within IT, so we're good there. Enrichment funds, this is funds that we typically would have used to offer to staff to do curriculum work this summer, which is valuable and is something we want to bring back in the future. But this would not allow those funds to come from local budget. We will try to use Title II where possible to be able to fund some of that work. Substitutes, and I had an email from Steve had reached out saying, I'm a little concerned about not having the elementary subs funded. I know that it seems like we need more subs, and the reality is that Steve's right, and simultaneously that's why we have the money. So we haven't been able to always have the subs available to take the days that we have budgeted for, and as a result we've underutilized the sub line in elementary, so we're money that goes back. And then some central office reductions, including a position in central office that we'll be phasing out in the first week of June. So those are the operating funds from this year. I will say what you don't see in here, and that we're still working through, and we'll be working through over the remainder of the year, is you don't see a line for $20,000 reduction in department budgets for materials and supplies. That will be an ongoing conversation. We're not earmarking funds for that right now. It's an ongoing conversation as we go through the year to continue to make case-by-case analysis of what we can and cannot do, with an eye towards what is always, as we close out a year, an indefinite. The numbers come together and we reconcile and we come to conclusions. So on a rolling basis, we will continue to consider departmental requests connected to things that people are hoping to spend this upcoming year. But that is not baked into what we're providing as operational savings during FY26. So maybe I'm happy to take any questions. I know we talked a little bit about this last night, but I'm happy to take any additional questions people have about those FY26.
I see Pip and then Byron.
You may have answered this last night, so I'm sorry if I'm
Yep,
forgetting
so
it.
good.
Regarding the enrichment funds, have there been any requests for those yet, or any
So
allocations?
what I will typically do with those is those are held specifically for summer work by staff to do curriculum development, instructional material development, things like that. And I usually will put out a call to administrators to find out what they want done. And now that it's aligned to focus area 1, we want to make sure that it's all in alignment. I have not done that, anticipating that we might need to do that. Last year I ended up having to do that for another reason because we were worried about grants. So this is the second year that it's been sort of put off. I'm hoping to utilize some of the grant money that did come through for that, and look at it, getting it done in a different way, because it is critical to have that done. But that's an area that we could easily do a swap this year.
Okay, great. So there's nothing pending that's going to have to
No.
be pulled back? Okay.
Nope.
Thank you.
Nothing pending that people have already asked for, but I think we have staff have become accustomed to that's going to be available for me if I have a project that I think I need to do during the summer to build towards what we're doing in the fall. So I'm sure there are things that we're not even aware of that staff were hoping they were going to do during that summertime.
Byron?
I had one on FY27, but are we gonna do like a separate thing on FY27?
I might like to do them separately, if that's okay
Yeah,
with
that's
you,
great.
Zach, so
Yep,
we can
sounds
take
good.
separate
Okay.
votes
And
on
then
those.
just on you mentioned on departmental requests, so there's nothing, there's no line item here, so I'm just interested to understand, like, I guess, how that's even at play in, yeah, it's just because there's nothing here around, the restrictions or anything in there. So I'm just looking for a little bit more, yeah, I suppose.
Sure. I think in the end that we, even within this, there's wiggle between now and the end of the year, and we're cutting back. I don't know. I think we always want to be in a position where we land at zero at the end, and so we're not going to hold back stuff that we don't need to necessarily. But I know that the rolling conversation that Brian and I have had is how do we close out the year still in the black, and to whatever extent we can free up those department funds, we will. But I don't know if Brian, you want to speak a little bit more to
Yeah, the challenge is because we're a city and we operate on a different accounting schedule than an independent school district would be, is we have a 13th month, which basically means everything at the last month we roll into the 13th month because we have all those bills that come in from from June, that'll end up coming in July. So we actually can't reconcile and get our bottom line number until probably mid-August. So we won't really know until about mid-August. I mean, I can't even tell you June 1st where it's going to be, but mid-August is generally when we find out what that number is. And if we are proactive, because there are some lines that are not supply lines or anything else that are going to be overexpended, and I have to be able to plan for that. For example, there's special education lines, or there's transportation lines, or there's other lines that I have to be prepared for. If they go over, I have to be able to pay for that, including like electricity and stuff like that.
So maybe, I'm gonna paraphrase here a little bit, but this is my understanding, is that these lines here are the targets in terms of where we're trying to cut for 26. But, they're not always bullseyes in terms of, those being the targets. And that is putting like structural pressure on other line items in the budget, right? To make sure, is that like a
I think
fair
that's fair. I think
assessment?
twofold. I'd say that's fair. Not to say we're pretty confident about what we're giving you right now. When we did the initial budget, we'll call it semi-freeze, coming out of the school care meeting that the city council had, we rolled right into that conversation and said, hold. You're not going to be able to spend without additional gatekeeping things that you were planning to spend if you were at a department level. Part of that was yes, there's a global strain on the whole system, but there's also the ability now, because I anticipated at one point, I didn't know if we were going to be able to get to 400. I didn't know if we were going to get to 200, and there was a possibility that one of the things that would have been in here was, here is a clear, definitive $35,000 cut across the board in all departmental spending. So that's now not in here. So I think that also, if what the board does tonight is agree to these as the what we believe are going to be the reductions, and endorses these reductions, knowing that there might be a little wiggle here and there, but for the most part, this is what it's going to be. That puts us in a position to go back and reassess some of those requests at the departmental level.
I think,
Now that we know that those don't have to be part of a definitive package we're saying is going to respond to the city's request.
Yeah, I understand. I think what I'm trying to shed light on a little bit is that while this dozen items here are the explicit things are getting cut, that there's pain outside of these line items as a result of this focus.
That's correct.
And there are things that are not being shown here that are being affected by these cuts.
Oh yeah, there's a ripple.
Yeah.
Because some of the we don't treat the lines we have as willy-nilly things,
Right.
but we do with a
I
budget the
understand.
size
Yeah,
of
it's a
ours.
large- yeah, absolutely,
There's movement over the course of a year. There's movement between lines. This effectively, wipes out the ability to have any of that movement as we move into the last quarter of our, the quarter of our year. So there is there's far more hesitancy around, approving some of these other expenditures because we do, as Brian said, this, you see what we're doing here, but there will be other lines in terms of what we budgeted that we're well over, and that we're trying to compensate across the district.
So I guess it would be difficult to say then that it would be, when this sort of action is being taken place, it'd be difficult to caveat this being to do this, but at the same time, make sure to protect any departmental spending. That'd be a very difficult directive.
Actually, it wouldn't, Byron. We are approving what we're allowing to be cut on this list. So if there is a desire to add departmental supplies to the list, that's certainly a recommendation that we can consider, but it's not on here. So my expectation would be, from what I'm seeing, that if we were asked to get from between 800 and 900 and we're at 983, and departmental supplies are not one of the listed items that we're cutting, that the effect of us passing these other changes, assuming we don't make any amendments to modify it, would be that then those funds would become somewhat available again.
I think
like if we were being asked to cut, then I'd want to be able to vote on that.
So I think the key word in what you just said was somewhat.
Okay.
So it's not complete, like, if you pass these, we're in a position to guarantee to you that we can green light every single set of department lines that was originally budgeted, all 100% is gonna be available for spending.
Understood.
Because we're not showing all the lines that are potentially over in other places that we're gonna have to compensate for.
Completely understand that.
But overall, the general kind of desire to when it is possible to assess and reassess on an ongoing basis, maximizing the amount of money that we can put in the classroom is definitely a priority for us.
I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I guess I would say if we were asked to get between 800 and 900,000 and we're at 983,000, and we are able to maintain classroom supplies, I would want to do that to the fullest extent possible. I don't want to monopolize the time. Brian, I see your hand, so.
I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at this, and I'm hoping that we can vote this way, is not necessarily on the dollar amount.
Right.
Because what we're going to say is, like, some of these are anticipated savings, right? That you don't even know, like, 100% you're going to be able to, the number could come lower, could come higher.
Right.
But I do agree with what Lisa said, is that we've hit that goal of between 800 and 900,000, right?
Yes.
So if we say these are the items that we're going to target, we're going to try to target these numbers. We might hit it on the nose, but I would prefer, like, if it comes to the lower on the 800,000 side, so I'm rather targeting a number on the vote. I'd rather target that these are the line items, and this is like the target that we're trying to hit, but these are the line items we're focusing on. See what I'm saying?
Totally.
I agree.
I see what you're saying, and we're happy to be, we're happy to be in that position with your backing. That'd be great.
And if there's other line items, I'd kind of want that to be a board discussion.
Right.
That are beyond what's listed here.
It's tough because it's a fluid situation where it's very fluid.
I understand it's
Where
fluid, but if we go from
These are
983
numbers
down.
on paper right now.
I
These are
understand.
not the real thing. So at the end of the year, if we maybe end up at 300,000, we got a problem. And we're trying to do the best we can on a very tight budget, because remember, we only got a 2.9% increase last year. This is already a tight budget. If we had this conversation in October, I'd say this is not possible at all.
I completely understand the numbers could change, but I think what the board is looking for broadly is that the line items that are being targeted for cuts are identified and approved by the board. I understand if the numbers move a bit, but
Well, you have to give us some authority to do some, because it's not going to be exact. We have to have some ability to make some decisions on what is and isn't affected to reach the goal. Because if you're going to determine exactly what line it's going to come out of, then my hands are tied. I can't do anything. Someone's going to lose out, or we're going to not be able to spend on, say, special ed services that we're required to provide.
I see.
Well, and I would say one other thing. The other piece in this, right, is whether or not the goal is sacrosanct, or this particular number is sacrosanct, and it's not. If it's not, then that's fine. You approve us to not spend up to these amounts in these categories if we have the ability to do it. And then whatever comes out on the backside comes out on the backside. But I would say this, on an annual basis, we make discretionary decisions about spending or not spending all of a line.
This is first page.
That happens every year all the time.
100%, but in a
So-
situation where we're being asked to cut so aggressively in the budget, I just want to make sure that we're transparent
2 of 27.
about what cuts we're approving when we're taking a vote on it. But I see other hands, so I think Brian, and then Pip, and then Nancy.
Well, I just want to make a clarification on what you said, and just so I understand. But, you know, I think one of the line items is 100,000 for special ed, right? So that may not come to fruition at all, right? That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Right, but it doesn't prevent us from voting and saying that's the target, right?
Right.
And I think, and you guys have said, we think it's achievable, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think, you know, by saying that these are the line items that we want to target, I think is as valid as, you know, a vote we can make
I
at this
think it's
point,
valid.
right?
I'm saying when you get into like, well, these supply lines should be cut, these supplies shouldn't be cut.
Yep.
You
No,
start
I'm-
getting into little stuff, you know, getting into those smaller lines like that, it becomes much more difficult
No,
for
I
us
think I
to do
understand.
what we're trying to do. So
I guess I'm trying to back away from an exact number,
Yeah.
right? And try to get the goal between 800,000 and 900,000. We think we can get 983, right? By giving you some leeway to say, oh, we came at 900, and not have to go steal from something else to, you know what I mean? To backfill this, that we said 983. I guess that's what I'm getting
Yeah,
at.
no, I definitely hear the intent.
I think Pip, and then Nancy, I think.
So Brian, you said that there has to be some fluidity, and I understand that. I think what we've heard a little bit is some feedback that fluidity is not only confusing, but it's impacting our curriculum at this point. And so I'm not feeling confident in what I've heard tonight that, for instance, our art classes are going to be supplied with the supplies they need to be able to teach the classes that they're trying to teach and they're expected to teach. And so I want to be assured that that's not going to be one of the impacts of what we're voting on.
So here would be my concern, just in terms of process, is you got an email from one department that bypassed the system that we have in place for professionals to make decisions about what to do. That removes that department from all the other context of a multi-million-dollar operation, and doesn't give every other department the opportunity to have the same process to weigh their particular stuff. So I think my concern is that without the board sitting on a daily basis to review every department request, it's hard for you to put all those things into context and weigh them against one another. I also have concern about a process where our normal budgetary process is bypassed by a group of employees that don't go through the normal system. So an example I had the other day is I was speaking to somebody and I said, well, if DPW, if somebody who worked at DPW was concerned that there was something on one of their trucks that they felt like should be replaced, and Peter Rice decided that they didn't have the funds to do it, we wouldn't have employees at DPW emailing the city council to say, I think you should replace my bearings in my wheel. So I have concerns about that from a process perspective, and the process perspective is not about authority, it's about the ability to weigh all the different people that would like to have their second chance in court on what's going to happen in regard to the spending. And I'll stop talking.
And I will say that every department, I've spoken to every department, and they've all been very good about working with us, with the exception of one.
Okay,
And-
well, I would say in response to that, I agree with you that there is a process that needs to be followed. I think when we hear directly from people, it's because there's a sense that their needs aren't being met in the process. So I take that to heart, and I think
Absolutely, I appreciate that.
I appreciate that they're bringing this to light. But I also am only using the art department as an example of one of the situations. I don't want any of our teachers not to be able to teach their courses because we're cutting their funds. That's not the right place to cut, in my opinion. So I want to be assured that at least for the rest of this year, our classes are going to be able to continue the way they're expected to. And if we need to find somewhere else to take the funds from, I would like to find that place, or be assured that we're not going to quietly steal it from places it's already been assigned.
So I saw Nancy and then Byron.
I'm going to pass till we get to the 27.
Okay, Byron?
Yeah, I mean, to what Pip's saying, I think like the message, the email is a signal in the system to me, right? And so it's representative of, stress in the system. And I think what I'm interpreting here is that the 26 cuts are tight enough, right, that they are going to cause pain. And I don't think, to your point, Pip, about we're looking for assurances, I don't think they can make assurances because it's too tight against what the 26 budget was passed. And I think, and I don't know if there was like whatever was referenced in the email about like a directive. I think a directive around like, oh, it can't bleed over to other things is doesn't make any sense to me. Like if you're that tight on things, you can't make that directive. It doesn't make any sense. So I think that's the point I'm trying to make is like, I don't think they can make assurances. And I think that the risk is here with the FY26 cuts for specifically the type of signal that we got. And that's the point I was trying to make.
I was just going to say, we prioritize, and this is part of what I was saying before, keeping funds in classrooms so kids can do things. That is a priority. And the original set of conversations we were having up through now included the distinct possibility, because this has been a very fast developing situation, right? These types of these types of changes in a budget are things we usually develop over months, not, we can change. And so there was a real possibility that there was going to be a line in here that was tens of thousands of dollars that were like explicitly like, it is all over. There was no more conversation. We don't have the ability to spend these funds. And we intentionally did not include this here, which opens the door for us to go back to conversations to re-entertain requests, knowing that we no longer have to have that in order to hit some of these target numbers. Simultaneously, what you're saying, Byron, about strain on the system is the case. It is, and this was the dialogue we had when I had with principals going back a couple weeks. I said, okay, guys, here's the deal. This is what we're looking at. These are not the types of things we're going to do without pain. Mm-hmm. This is at a level, at a time of year where there is going to be pain. This is not going to be things where you're like, well, we could kind of get away with a few less glue sticks. This is like things are going to not happen that we planned to happen that we're going to feel crummy about. So my hope is that we're still in a position to do a bunch of those things based on this conversation. The ability to guarantee, again, we can do that. If you tell us, you give us a directive, we're going to follow that directive. What the ripple effect of that is in a system that is strained, we can't anticipate.
So I guess this is my concern, and I don't want to monopolize the time, but I think if we're talking at the level of glue sticks and there's no line item here that says we're cutting classroom supplies, then I feel like that's not something that the board is approving to be cut. And if there's a need for us to consider that, I think that's certainly a discussion that we can have, but that's not what's here. So that's where I think there's a little bit of concern that, if we're getting down into, like kind of below $10,000 in certain line items, and then we might decide at a later date to get into classroom supplies. Like my hope is if we approved all of this, that the other funds would free up. And maybe I misunderstood the process, but I guess if the ask is for us as a board to approve no more purchase of classroom supplies or cutting classroom supply spending by 20% or whatever it is,
Right.
you know, then I'm comfortable considering that under the circumstances, but it's not here. So I guess what I'm saying is we're voting on cuts that don't include that cut. And that's where I think we're stuck.
I would just say, in that, on an annual basis, we make decisions to not fully expend lines that we
No, completely understood.
we do that. We come to conclusions about where we are, other offsetting needs. So this is not me trying to be like, I'm determined to not free up all the money. It's just we need additional flexibility. I mean, I think we need flexibility. There is a potential for other operational impact if we don't have the flexibility to make the types of decisions where, with a goal of giving back as much as we can to departmental budgets.
And just one thing to sort of bring up, because this sort of is reminding me a little bit of COVID when prices started spiking. And I'm thinking about things like purchasing paper, purchasing other kinds of things that we absolutely must have. And between the fuel shipment costs, the cost of paper, the cost of production, if we normally would budget, let's say, $5,000 for paper, and it's coming to us now at $7,000, we've got to find that other $2,000. And so some of that sort of flexibility that we're talking about, we're looking at some of these lines. I'll talk about my enrichment line, because I know that that's a line that we have gone to previously, just because it's there and we're waiting until summer to use that, and geez, well, we need $2,000 to pay for some of the paper. So there is some of that flexibility that should be accounted for, knowing that these are the line items that we're saying in this list. We can say for sure these are places that we can say these are numbers that we will rely on. The rest of the budget that's not up here, we're still trying to make happen. So it's hard for us to say this and nothing else, because what happens if gas suddenly becomes $6 a gallon and now the food deliveries are up, and there's things that we still can't anticipate. So that's just another piece to sort of consider.
100%.
Looking at that.
And we do not, and this is a very unusual budget year, and I don't think anyone sitting up here wants to, in a normal circumstance, be in the position of, debating the cost of paper or how many glue sticks we get. That's 100% beyond this board's purview. But in this very weird situation that we're in, I guess my question is, if we have a range that is within what the council asked us, that's somewhere between 800,000 and 983,000, and we hit it with these things, then I think we don't necessarily want to be getting into what teachers need in the classrooms. And I'm not trying to say that just because we heard from, some folks who are concerned about art supplies, but just across the district, if we're being asked to make that decision, then let's name it, and let's tell the council that what we were asked to hit requires us to cut classroom supplies, and let's be upfront about it, I guess is the question. But I see a bunch of other hands, and I'm talking too much. I see Steve, and then Brian.
Yeah,
Sorry, Nancy. Did you?
that's okay.
Sorry.
So we were hit with an unexpected huge cost from school care. But as Patty was pointing out, we could be hit by unexpected huge costs, which happens routinely within a year. We could be having an unexpected out-of-district placement, or unexpected huge spike in electricity costs, or there's so many, every year there's unexpected things that can happen in the budget. What I hear in this conversation are two things which I don't think are antithetical. One is that the board wants and is asking administration to prioritize classroom materials as much as possible. I think it would be wrong for us to say, don't cut. I think what the message has been clear is, please make it a priority as you make these decisions. But we also need to be careful, because we don't want to hand tie administration with all the unanticipated things that could happen.
Brian?
So just another way that I'm thinking about this. So for example, we're talking about the 26 spending reductions, right? And we put a number of $418,210, right? let's say, for example, for me, if we're hitting the spirit of between $800,000 and $900,000, let's say that's our goal, 418, but we hit 400 for some reason. What I'd rather you not do is take the $18,000 out of this and say, we still hit our goal of a reduction of between this and this.
Yep.
Is what I'm trying to explain. That's what I would prefer us to be able to vote on versus this exact number. Because I think you guys believe that we can hit this number, and I know there's other things, sort of it's a shell game a little bit. But what I'm hoping for is that we say maybe there's a bottom number where this starts to push everything else out, but say, make this more of a goal, I guess. And these are the line items, and this is the goal for each line item. And we believe we're pretty sure we're going to hit these, but I also don't want to take 18,000 out of some other fund, which would really, affect teaching.
Yep.
I guess that's the way I'm trying to paint it.
Sure.
Nancy.
I'm bringing up kind of a different subject. I think when this all happened with school care, and we all know about the health stabilization fund that the city has, I figured in my mind that the city would kind of pick up almost half of this and the schools would pick up the other half. I think last night I was disappointed when we learned that the city was only going to come up with $250,000 from the health stabilization fund. And I'm wondering if our board can ask for more than that. Can we ask the city for a total of $500,000 from the health stabilization fund? And then all these numbers would change. I think that's something we should consider. When I asked the question last night and Nathan answered it, I don't understand the percentages and the numbers. It's just above my head. But the fact of the matter is there's a lot of money in that fund. And I know that a certain amount has to be kept and this and that. And like I say, I don't quite grasp that in my head. But I'm wondering if we should ask the city council to provide more of that funding for us. Just a thought.
I mean, I think we certainly can go to the council and make those requests and speak in public comment. I also think that we went through a process with them. They made the ask of us, and we did our best to hit that target that they requested. And we did have the work session last night. So I feel like we, at least at this moment, have to take some action on the proposals in front of us. And then if we separately want to go to the council, we certainly can contemplate that. As individuals, we can discuss that idea, and certainly.
You don't think as a board we could make that request?
I mean, I think that's something we can talk about. I almost feel like that's a little separate from this specific vote. But I certainly would entertain other opinions on that. I mean, I guess I just want to be careful not to fail to deliver to the council what we discussed with them last night as our intended contribution. But I do think we could certainly, entertain, something in that direction. I don't know what others think about that. I don't want to monopolize that idea. Pip, I see a hand.
I had a similar thought to what Nancy's expressing, so I would be in support of that. I think one of the things that you pointed out, Lisa, was that in our discussion last night, we didn't talk about the potential need to impact supplies for teachers. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not listed on this this potential impact document. And so it might be that if the city learned that we were going to that extreme, or that was what would be required, that they would feel differently and maybe would be willing to chip in some more money. And then maybe this will help be the perfect transition to FY27. I'm wondering if there might be other ways to find more reductions in FY27 to minimize the impact this year.
Okay. So I guess here's what I feel, like our ask of our administrative team was to come to us with a series of potential reductions for fiscal '26 to try to get us in the ballpark of the number that the council asked for us. And I do want us to be able to take a vote on that piece. I feel like if we are looking at cuts to classroom and curriculum supplies, I think at a minimum, the ask from the board is to have the transparency around that and name it, you know, because our hope was to avoid that to the fullest extent possible. And if we still have to do it anyway, because of whatever unpredictable things come forward, then I think we want to know that, we want to name it, and we want to tell the council that it's happening and the community that it's happening, so that if that gives us an opportunity to discuss the possibility of reducing our contribution to the payment so that we can retain that. I can't imagine that it would be enough money to make a meaningful change in our ability to make a $1.57 million payment. So I guess I would want to be able to circle back with the city on that idea if we need to. So I guess,
So could,
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I like where this line of thinking is going. And I don't know if we can pass, what's being presented this evening with a caveat around that specific thing, where when we get to a place where classrooms are affected, that we can, request assistance from the council to support those specific things. Like if we get down to like empty, right? You're driving your '89 Camry and you're like on empty, and like you're really empty, right? That then we can ask for that $5 to fill the tank till we get home, I think is the metaphor. Yeah.
So I think what we're looking for is clarity around what we're approving. You know, and I think, like, I appreciate the need for the fluidity. I totally understand that we could have like a student transfer into the district tomorrow that has high needs for a bunch of services that could totally change all of these numbers very quickly. That could happen, you know, any number of things. You know, we could have another flood at one of the schools. I mean, all sorts of things could occur. But I think conceptually what we're looking for is to approve what line items we're targeting for cuts.
Yep.
And then if there's other line items, to have that in some way be transparent and have us have the ability as a board to go back to the city and have that conversation. If we're saying, look, we hit our target as best we could and we don't want to be in a position to do these other cuts, and have that conversation with them.
Yep, I understand that desire, and we will, of course, we'll do what you want us to do. This request to lock down certain areas of the budget, I'm beating a dead horse, is a level of restriction on operations that is atypical of what we typically do. So it potentially will have repercussions we cannot anticipate. And I assume that we're not going to hold weekly meetings to make decisions about individual lines. So we would, I think what the desire I'm hearing is, we would greenlight all spending in departments, and then we would have to pick up the pieces in terms of what else doesn't get done. We wouldn't necessarily be transparent about all those things, because there's all kinds of little ways in which those things happen. But we would be transparent about any budgeted departmental spending that wasn't allowed to continue as a result of the strain on the system. Okay, got it.
Is that what people are looking for? Pip?
I'm not sure that what we're saying is that there should be no cuts to departmental spending. I think we're saying we want them to be represented on this document that we're voting on.
If they're being cut.
Or I agree with Byron's suggestion, if we get to the point where those are being impacted because they're not on here,
Yeah.
then we should know about it.
Yeah.
And we should get the chance to go back to the city and tell them, because I think we're all gonna, we're in an atypical situation.
Yep.
And I don't,
Yep.
disagree with you that we shouldn't be managing the budget to this degree, but we've been asked to vote on this, and we've been asked to make this change to what we are requesting of the city, so we have to feel comfortable
Sure.
with what we're voting on.
Yep, great.
So I don't think it's you can't make any reductions, but just that we want to be able to name them and account for them and go back to the city and say, look, as we have gone through this process, we have had to dig deeper than just what's on this list, and we have had to make the following additional decisions to get to our target, and at least be transparent about it. Does that feel, because I mean,
I understand the goal. We'll do our best. We will accomplish the goal you're laying out for us.
any other discussion on fiscal 26?
I'm not going to vote for it because I would like to ask the city to give us $250,000 more. So I don't know how to fit that into the motion, or if I can make a friendly amendment, or I don't know the proper way to do that. But if I did the math, if you take 983 and you minus 250, it gets us down to 733. So instead of a 983 budget cut, we're dealing with a 733,000, which is, a little bit better.
I mean, if you would like to make a motion that we make that request to the city, you could certainly do that and we can discuss it. I think I would be reluctant not to approve some version of the changes to fiscal 26 as presented personally, because that was the ask, and we had the work session last night where we said that's what we were going to consider and vote on. So I think it would be a bit tricky to go back to them after that and ask for a substantial change in the numbers. But I do think we could, it's fluid. The city manager still has the budget. They still have the ability to make changes. So I think if you want to make a motion, I think we can consider that. I do wonder if we could consider them independently so that we pass what's been proposed, if people are willing to do that, and then also consider whether we want to separately go back to the city to see if they will consider reducing the amount that we need to contribute. Does that make sense to you? Or
Well, I think we should do it now. I think we should make that decision now, whether we would like to ask the city for $250,000 more.
well, if you'd like to make a motion, then why don't you do that, and then we can discuss it.
Right now, we don't have any motion on the floor. We're just looking at
We're just discussing it. So
Yep.
there's been no motion that you need to amend. So if you'd like to make a motion, you can certainly do that.
I'd like to make a motion that we ask the city to provide $250,000 more from the Health Stabilization Fund to help offset the costs that we have to school care.
Second.
Discussion?
I would vote against that motion. I think the city council is very clear where they stand. I don't see there would be anything. I think we will just end up, it reminds me of the conversation about school care. We were going to end up having to pay the $1.57 million. We went through all this process. I'm sympathetic to your feeling, Nancy, and I have to admit, I can kind of concur some of the figures, thinking, how did they get that? But I feel like the city council's been very clear that that's what they want to offer, and I don't see this as a profitable motion. I'm sorry.
I see Pip and then
So
Brian. Go ahead, Pip.
I'd like to throw one more thing out there, which is, as we look to hire a new business administrator, I know that the city has been very much in support of consolidation as much as possible to make our government, our city government, function as efficiently as possible. Is there any wiggle room in that hiring process where we might turn over some of the responsibilities of the business administrator, or rely on the city administrator in ways where we might hire someone at a lower cost than what we're accustomed to.
So in the FY '27, I mean, the biggest cost savings you have in FY '27 is the model through a lot of conversation with city finance around taking the position of the assistant business administrator, moving that position to where basically city finance is picking up the bill for half a year, and then us doing an assessment for that particular position in December when we have the new BA on board and city finance. So we're already significantly reducing the amount of folks connected with our two ways. We have that position, and then we have a full-time clerical position, both out of our business office, that we are giving up, one completely in order to then lean more on, well, spread the duties across more of our staff when it comes to the administrative assistant position for personnel, and to lean more heavily on city HR. So there's some of the synergy that I think that some portion of the council is hoping for. And then we're taking the assistant BA position completely off of our books. We are moving that to city finance with then the date of the end of the calendar year to make decisions about what happens to that position going forward. I would be hesitant to go any deeper than that, and and have the idea of having no BA, which has been floated by some people on the city council, I think is entirely problematic. I do not think the school board will receive the services it needs to make the types of financial decisions it needs to. I also don't think that is, in my conversations with city finance, I don't think that is the position of city finance either. That would be an appropriate move. But that this is we're making two very significant moves in terms of trying to find those efficiencies between departments and leaning into utilization of those two departments in a bigger way. That there's going to be structurally for us is potentially two positions could mean in the end that we could move on without. So I would say, just, I don't know, I'm beating around the bush, but the elimination of the business manager position as a whole, which I think the mayor floated in comments last night, I think would not serve this board well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Brian and then Steve?
I just, Nancy, I probably will vote no on this, and just, me logically thinking about this, we presented, super presented last night. We said, we really think we can get 983. It's going to be painful, but we think we can do it. Yeah. And then, I think last night was probably the opportunity to ask for that if we were really going to push for that. But now that card is on the table, basically what we would ask for is, well, we want less pain. Somebody else is going to feel the pain. I think that's where the logic is going to go. But I agree with Steve. I think what's going to happen is it's probably not a battle that, in the spirit of working together and in the spirit of sharing the pain, it's probably not a battle at this point that we're going to win. And it also is probably not ideal in the spirit of trying to work together at this point. That's how I feel about it.
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Steve?
Sorry. Lost my thought on that one. The one thing I just wanted to say was that I do think there's legitimacy in the fact that healthcare has been incredibly erratic, and that trying to protect the fund as much as they're trying to protect it, given what we experienced this year, is not an unreasonable position for the city council to take. I think that caution, given what we've experienced, makes a little sense. And the other thing I did want to say is, and I have to go off to administration, when I heard that we were going to have to make I thought we were going to make like $500,000 worth of cuts, and I thought, where in the heck is that going to come from? I mean, I couldn't fathom because I looked through the budget. So I feel like the administration's done a really good job finding as painless as possible options that not as directly impacting kids. And I do think the board, that we as a board have been very clear that we want classrooms to be impacted as little as possible. I feel like that's been heard. So I guess for me, it's, I hear you, but I don't support you on that one.
I was just saying, in terms of conceptually, kind of where, looking back at some notes, conceptually where the city sees this, and I think the city, and then Nathan did this a little bit last night, which I think is important in terms of the framing, is that there's two different buckets of things we're trying to affect. So there's the assessment, which we spend a lot, we've primarily, and this could be some of my own messaging, we spent a lot of time talking about the $1.57 million assessment, like that's the whole game, but it's not. So there's another piece, but on the 1.57, we are, in that, the city would have to go ahead and pay through a combination of stabilization and things they're not spending on. So I think last night, the deputy city manager for finance talked about $1 million of spending they're not doing, that they are holding off on in order to help support a bill that is, our bill. And so we are paying 400 and change towards the assessment that then they're going to pick up 900 plus $100,000 on to just pay the assessment. Separately, the other bucket is the 26.2% increase. Now, when we budgeted, and then we followed city financial policy, we budgeted around the 10-year rolling average for what the health insurance premiums increase would be, which would have been 7%. But if the city, in this case, because it's wanting to protect the stabilization fund, says this is not a time for us to go ahead and just do the 10-year rolling average, we need you to pick up more because it's such a significant increase, that the combination of the 1.5 and the 26.2% could basically wipe out, significant impact beyond what they want to do on the fund. So the 26.2 creates another large chunk of money for the city to pick up. So, and that one is also, it takes I think we had, I want to say, no, it adds another, I know it's 800,000. The thing is this, the city is not just picking up what's in the stabilization fund for us. They're also making a bunch of other reductions in order to pay for the assessment that came from school care to make sure our people maintain health insurance, and the 26.2% increase in health care premiums that we did not fully budget because we're not expected to based on the 2002 health care stabilization policy. But they're saying, we need you to pick that up. We need you to pick up a bigger portion of that. We need you to not even pick up the whole thing. We need you to pick up a bigger portion of that than you were going to. And basically, I think it's more or less half of the additional money that we would have spent on health insurance for 27, they need us to pick up. They're going to pick up the other half. So in there's all those swirling kind of buckets they're taking from. They are not exclusively taking from the stabilization bucket. They are also taking from their own operating funds and their own budget proposals across departments to try to assist us to be in a position to make sure that our people have ongoing access to health insurance.
And they did make that comment today during their core meeting this morning when I was there, and Nathan did talk to all the managers of the departments to make sure that they too are looking to see where they can make adjustments and cuts, and he did say that it could be places that it's going to hurt. So there's pain all around for as bad as that sounds, and I just keep thinking about, and Brian, maybe you could speak a little bit to cost of gasoline for like our busing. If that continues to go up, just because I filled up today and it it hurts. Where would that extra money come from? Like if the transportation costs come up, where would we pull that usually from?
Anywhere else in the budget where we're under.
Okay, that's so in a normal year, if we would have gas prices going up, we would have to pull for someplace.
You get a fuel surcharge based upon the average price of fuel for our contract.
Yeah, so contract. Okay, I was just checking. Thank you.
Jen, you had a question?
I just have a question about the out-of-district tuition projected enrollment savings for this year. Does that mean like someone's moving out of district or someone is moving from their out-of-district placement back into one of our schools. And then you also have it for next year. There's the Portsmouth Middle School out-of-district tuition.
So twofold, on 26, it's actually as we start reconciling what we initially encumbered. So we sign contracts, we encumber, we set up basically, this is what we think the full amount's gonna be, what's gonna cost for an out-of-district placement. And then as we start to, we're not day by day making changes to what that initial estimate is. So what we did in this very often it's the end of the year, and then we go, okay, what did it actually end up costing us? We usually, if we're gonna make a mistake, obviously we wanna make the mistake long and not short. And so in looking through now, shaking the trees earlier, we've been able to suss out that we can come up with that money for this year. I will say that in the FY27 reductions, where we have the two 50K projected enrollment savings on out of district, I think that's the riskiest set of moves for us.
Yeah, was that included in part of funding the assistant of student services?
So,
Remember,
so our
or
hope
is
is that through the funding of that position, that we will, through a combination of, if we have one, as I say, and this is not the primary thing, having students come back in next year, but if we have one student come in back next year, we've already paid for what we paid for this, or we already paid for the assistant director based on just one kid. And so I think it's a combination of the stemming. The hope is that we are, and I think we didn't talk about this enough last night because I got into the mayor in a conversation about out-of-district placement. But part of this is having the bandwidth of a person on the ground to expand our ability to develop programs, and that's going to be the part of our cost curve bending is being able to develop in-house programs. And we got into that. It was a prolonged conversation, I think, with the mayor saying, like, well, just the case managers just going to develop programs, and the case managers are just going to do this stuff. And we just don't think that that's realistic. And so that's been the dialogue, is we think, but I will say that this is the most speculative in 27 of the savings that we think that we could target. And it's the one to I think, question the most in terms of things that we put forward.
So we have Nancy's motion on the table. Do we have any other discussion on that motion?
Could I just say one more thing? I think $1 million cut to our budget is devastating. And think of our students, think of our teachers. I think it's devastating. And in the motion, we're just asking for $250,000 more. We know that money is in the Health Stabilization Fund. At least it will lessen the burden a little bit, lessen the hurt a little bit. Maybe we should have had this meeting before we met with the city council last night. That may have been a good idea, because then we could have hashed this out. When we went to the city council, we could have said, can you just give us $250,000 more? So I just think this is a very devastating situation for our schools to be in.
It is.
It is. And Nancy, I really, really appreciate the spirit of what you're asking. I do feel like this is only one small piece of our long months ahead of continuing to discuss our budget. And I think I would agree with Brian. I worry a bit at this moment, after having just met with the council, to then circle back and change what we're considering in terms of our end. But I do think we should be very vigilant about protecting the remainder of our budget. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. No, I left that on earlier because my kid was whatever. Sorry about that.
It was a good crescendo.
Nice little break there. That we can't get off our devices. The schools are phone free. But I feel like, in seriousness, that we have still to defend our overall budget for fiscal 27, which we already cut 4.5 full-time positions in that budget that we presented to the council. We already gave them a budget that was considerably below the typical like 6% and change that we need to keep everything the same. I would worry about any additional back and forth on this piece, potentially just coming back to compromise the rest of the fiscal 27 budget. So that's part of why I would be not in favor, but sorry.
Oh, no, you were talking. I was just going to say, I think the other piece is, I think you heard from at least one counselor and another considering what was being said. Well, why aren't they covering the whole 1.57? Why are we covering this? It's their money, it's their budget. They should just cover it. I mean, that was floated at one point last night, and it's like, where's the rest? Was one response to what we presented. And I think, and that was just around the 1.57. That wasn't even including the other portion. I mean, so that could be, they could be talking.
They set the line, so
like
whatever,
2.5 mil or whatever. So I just, what I worry about is really similar to what Lisa's saying is, if we go back and ask them, like, great, we'll take you out of the stabilization fund and we're going to cut you $300,000 in your FY27 budget. Yeah. So we'll just get it back there. And even if that's not, not that cynical, but that could be an outcome of the budget process, and we end up being in a situation where we get further reduced in 27 in order to compensate.
We've also just worked very hard throughout this process to be collaborative, and we've had so many joint work sessions and just put so much time in on all sides, from our school staff, from our city staff, from our city council, and from our board up here, to try to work together to solve this problem that we didn't make. And so I just would hate to unravel that hard work to build that trust and those relationships by changing the plan at this moment. But I don't know. I feel like, are any other last thoughts on this?
Yes, I've had my hand raised several times.
I'm so sorry, Lee. Go ahead.
Yep. So I appreciate what you're saying, Nancy, and I do appreciate the fact that we're in a position where we've made some commitments and we need to follow through. I think the other thing that I'm concerned about, and I'm just going to state the concern, even if it means absolutely nothing, which is it creates an incentive to go find cuts in special education and incentivizes doing so even when they may not actually need to be there. And we may need to keep our heads abreast or our minds abreast of the fact that we may be trying to find reasons to do cuts that have a negative impact on children and children that actually need those services. And I don't want to see that happen. And I don't want to see an incentivized approach to actually going and finding those cuts because we put them on the table.
Thank you, Lee. Is there any other comments? Can we have a roll call vote on the motion from Nancy to ask the council to take $250 million out of the health stabilization fund?
250,000.
Sorry, what did I just say? Oh, God, I
If
can't
there's
speak
250 million in the
That'd be
stabilization.
awesome. That'd be a good fund.
Let's go for it.
All right, I'm fired.
Nancy Kleberg.
I'm distracted
Trish
by my
Campbell.
phone.
No.
Lee Hudson.
No.
Jennifer Shump.
No.
Pip Clues.
Yes.
Stephen Adler.
No.
Byron Maddow.
yes.
Brian French.
No.
Lisa Rappaport.
No.
3 to 6. Fails.
Okay. So at this point, we've had a long discussion on fiscal 26. Is there any additional discussion on the proposal before us to reduce spending for fiscal 26? I don't believe we had a motion on
There's
the
been no
table,
motion.
so I'm sorry, Pip, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just want to understand, we're voting to approve specifically the reductions for
Correct.
fiscal year 26?
Correct.
Yeah.
As presented by the superintendent.
We need a motion though, right?
Yes, I was about, you would want, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve or recommend the cuts that's suggested here by the superintendent for FY26.
Seconded.
Okay, any additional discussion on that? Pip, and then I hear Nancy over here.
Would the motion maker consider adding cuts to classroom supplies to this list?
I think we need to pass it cleanly as it's proposed here. I think there's several reasons for that. I agree with you. I think those things should be called out if they're going to happen. But I think the spirit of this motion is that these are the targets, and I agree with this in terms of what these targets are going to be. So I wouldn't take. I mean, you can add it as a amendment we can vote on, but I wouldn't take it as a friendly.
I don't know that I've said this, but I really appreciate the work that has gone into finding places where we can cut that are going to have minimal impact. As has been stated, I am still feeling concerned that it doesn't represent the real risk of what may be impacted. So I'm not comfortable voting in favor of it for that reason. So I'm looking to find another way to identify that as a potential impact. Maybe it's what you suggested, Byron, about coming back to the board when and if that becomes necessary. I don't know if that would find its way into your motion or not.
Do we have a second on Byron's motion?
Yes, it was Steve.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so Pip and Steve, did you have something to add?
I was thinking about what Pip was saying. I think my recommendation would be maybe another motion that just says that the board wishes to articulate that to the administration, that to make sure that every effort's made to maintain classroom supplies. Something simple like that.
Or
I'd appreciate that.
Tish, may I suggest as well that we pass as this with the added, if there are additional significant cuts that have to be made, the school board is presented with it for, consideration. Thank you, Nancy. That way there is full clarity, but we're also not micromanaging. But if they're significant, we should be aware because we do answer to the community as well.
I agree with the spirit of that, Tish. I also agree with Byron that we'd want to try to have a clean motion that passes or doesn't, and then maybe we can consider whether there's anything else that we'd like to entertain, if that works for everyone. I just want to be straightforward about what we are approving. Is there any other discussion? Nancy?
I'm going to vote no for the same reason I just voted no. I believe that this cut is too much for our kids. So I will vote no.
Anyone else?
Yep, I will speak up again. So I think I would feel comfortable with an amendment like that to this because of the fact that it would allow us to be aware. So what I heard you, Zach, say, which was, hey, if we actually had one out-of-district placement that didn't occur or actually was pulled back into district that could reduce that cost, great. But what if that doesn't happen? Then we end up having a situation where we are incentivized to go find other special education cuts in order to make that a reality. I'd feel much more comfortable if that came back to the table as opposed to having that being that incentivization to actually occur.
I think, Lee, is that primarily the FY27 piece when you mentioned that?
Yeah.
'Cause I think
That's not what we're voting on at the moment,
right.
though.
But I was going to say, well,
gosh, I'm
but
sorry.
in 20, but I just want to make sure I was clear because
I'm
in
so
20.
lost.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I was just going to say, I think in the 20, I think the motion on the floor is 26, and I think in 26 that we don't see that the reductions that we're talking about in 26 as speculative, where in '27, there is some anticipatory savings that I agree with you. It could be something that creates, I understand, even if it's the appearance of creating incentive, that could be problematic for some of our relationships with families who may be on the cusp, either have students out of district or be on the cusp of that conversation, and then be skeptical that the decision-making process at the table is being informed by this incentivizing of creating a target, in terms of that way. I appreciate that. Anyways, but that's in 27.
Good, great.
So,
Sorry about that.
No,
My
it's okay.
confusion.
It's been a little bit of a long week.
Tuesday.
I know.
It's only Tuesday.
Any other discussion on the motion for fiscal '26? Roll call vote.
The motion is to recommend cuts as suggested for FY '26. Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
No.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Clayberg,
No.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
passes 7-2.
Do we have any other motions that anyone wants to make before we move forward to fiscal '27 discussion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I'll do my best to represent what I think was being suggested here, which is that, in the case that there are, I'll call it significant impacts to classroom spending as a result of the FY '26 spending reductions, that that is brought to the board as an informational item.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? I see Jen.
I just would want us to define what significant would mean.
that would be helpful. That would be helpful for us.
That's a different term for different people.
Fair enough.
Oh,
Yeah, I'll try. I'll just pick a number here that's like somewhere in the median of where we're looking at the cuts here, something like 25,000.
Might we want to consider
25,000?
Or more, yeah.
if you're saying something like.
Would it be logical to consider a percentage in that case?
Yeah.
So we could better understand the impact, because I'm not sure that I know what that number means with regard to supplies.
I wonder, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I guess I'm looking to Zach or Brian to help with that.
You wouldn't know what the savings are until after the year's already over. I would say a 50% cut, I think is fair, because that's what I've been working with people on, is saying, I understand you need some, let's get it down 50% and see how it looks. And it's actually worked. For a lot of people have said, all right, well, I can make this work. Obviously it's not going to happen every year, but this year they understand. And they're finding things in their closets they didn't know existed. Even especially when it comes down to paper, which is the most expensive part, they're finding pastel colored paper in the closets that they haven't.
I was gonna say,
realized had.
in the middle school,
They're using
the
that.
middle school is like the pastel paper they haven't used for years because they got a bunch and they never used it. Well, it was like, kids are getting a bunch of pastel pink worksheets for a while until we burn through all that stuff. There are those types of, around the district, people are making those types of choices to figure out like, well, how do I do the things that I was gonna do, not the way I planned to do them, but can I still deliver the core of the service or the instruction that I was going to deliver while being cognizant that we're in a tough spot?
And I will add too, the principals are actually are all involved in this.
Principal's been really good.
And they've been excellent as far as being a filter to get this through. And they've said, all right, what can we do? What do we need to manage? And what can we do without? And they've figured out the needs and the wants, the difference.
And I think the ask is for those hard choices that our administrators and our staff are making to not be invisible in this process. I think that's at the end of the day what we're asking here. So you will have to make the hard choices to manage it as you do every year, and on top of all the impossible mess that we're all in because of school care at this moment. But I think what we're asking for is by the time our full budget is up for the council, that we're able to account as much as possible for all of these hard decisions that have been made across the district, so that it's not invisible to the council as they're contemplating our budget, so it's not invisible to the community. And so that we're just recognizing the hard work and hard choices that everybody's making. So I don't think the intention is to be like, no, we forbid you to stop buying glue sticks, you know, or whatever it
100%.
is.
This is
You know, it's,
right. This
we
is
don't want it to be an invisible set of painful cuts across the district that we simply let sort of go by. Like, we want to acknowledge that sacrifice that people are making.
Well, acknowledge it, but also, I mean, I think my biggest concern is that if it goes unseen, they will reach back to the well.
Yep, exactly.
That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And we want to be armed by the time our budget comes up to say, look, like, we've already given all of this.
Yeah.
If we are going with a dollar amount, is there a line, a dollar amount that you can inform us about it for that line item for classroom supplies? So we do
I mean,
understand?
across the district, you're probably looking at, 40 to 50,000 minimum.
Okay, so 25 would be about 50%.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
rather than putting a dollar figure, I like the idea of a percentage.
50% would be a fair amount.
Because that way too, you can look at, if we're saying 25,000 and say, a certain teacher wants something and it's just not in the budget, that 50,000, that's not gonna be reported to us because that's not part of that threshold. However, if we say, okay, well, that's 50% of the budget for that department, then that would come back to us. I think a percentage is a better representation than a dollar figure.
And that's been pretty much the standard. I know you can't shut it off completely, but I've had department heads come in and sit down with me, and we've gone through their budget and said, all right, what can we do? What can we do without?
Yeah.
What do you absolutely need? And some of them are like, you know what? I have a boosters club that's going to help me out, or I have my PTO that's going to cover some.
We're gonna hit donors choose, or we're gonna do.
Yeah, we're going to do some fundraising, and
And
they've been incredible as finding these
We have an incredible community.
ways of
Absolutely.
being able to fund these things
Yep.
without affecting the experience of the student.
And that doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions. There are special situations that have been considered and can be reconsidered based on where we're at right now. So,
I mean, there's certain things that are just, I can't cut. I mean, right now, you're looking at, athletics, transportation is pushing the envelope at the end of their budget, and they're gonna go over. And I just can't go out there and say, well, baseball team, you made the playoffs, but guess what? You're gonna drive yourself. I can't do that. It's just not,
Do it at the debate
it's not
team.
right. So, well, that's a whole different story, but,
and that's not unique to
Just think so.
athletics. I would just say that, I was like, that's not unique, I mean, it's not athletics, but it's other in other cases, we had people who spent their department budgets by January. And they're not affected by this. Now, and of course, what we're worried about, and staff will tell you this, is it's like, well, in the future, I'm never gonna wait. I'm gonna order all my stuff on the first day in July, and we don't want that either. But that will be a negative repercussion.
and that's part of my process that I go through every day when I look at, because I'm in charge of purchasing. I have to go through there. Are they buying stuff for next year, or are they buying it for this year?
Yep.
This time of year, usually they're buying stuff for next year, and you actually aren't allowed to do that.
But
You can't spend this year's money on next year's.
And I think, and I was just going to say, I hope that, department heads who are at home and listening to this stuff is, we appreciate all the hard work they do and how hard they're
They've been
working
great.
to
They've
do all
actually
this
been
stuff
great.
too. So I want to make sure it doesn't sound like we're bashing folks because we're not. We're trying to find a way through a very sticky wicket.
So I have one question, I guess, about the intention, of the motion, because I think what my objective would to be able to account for like the full toll. So I'm worried if we have a threshold of 50% or $25,000 that we're gonna still miss a lot of the pain. So I don't know what the intention is with this. Like, I'm not looking for the board to step in and micromanage it. I'm just looking to have the tally.
Yeah, maybe it's better if it's at the end of the process, we get a high level accounting of what was denied essentially as a result, right? Yeah.
To me, that feels more fair and maintains the flexibility where it's necessary, but still puts visibility on what we had to ultimately cut.
Right, because those are cuts that we need to show.
That can be a little difficult though, because now it's like trying to prove a negative, because if they didn't put an order in, if they chose not to put an order in, I don't know if that's.
But we can
the
show
same.
this much money was budgeted
see,
for
look at the
departments that
line
was
and
not
see
utilized,
what
and we
wasn't
can,
spent
and we
out
can
of
break
the
it
line.
out by departments. We can, you know, and some of it, one way, as an existing mechanism is you do get, you know, monthly financials from Brian. We can expand those financials a little bit to give you insight into like where, you know, again, it's what are broad categories where we're over or under, and we could get to the point where we have like a summative kind of department line. We could work on it, you know. So it's like, here's this, like in the midst of that monthly financial, here's this kind of this bucket of all the departmental spending and material type stuff, and here's where it's at. Here's what the budget is. Here's where we're at in terms of spending in that budget, and in relation to all the other different categories. That might be a way to have ongoing peek into where we're at and what's happening. So
I
I
can do
think that would
I
be
can do the same
helpful.
thing as your report you get now, but just have it, an additional report that shows supplies.
I think
Or
that would be
contracted services
helpful,
even.
because I think we don't want to perpetuate the idea that some people in the community have that there's just random piles of money sitting around that we never needed to
Oh, you
begin
can
with. 'Cause
always
that's
cut.
100% not the
Right.
case. We are making hard choices all over the district, pretty much every day at this point, to try to manage this. And I want to have the visibility on that so that when we're defending our budget, we can also point to all of the things that are being done to manage this. I guess that's my intention with it. But I saw a hand over here.
You did. So my question is in regards to the reporting. I know you talked about the 13th month. Would that be something that's included in the 13th month, or would that end at the 12th
Well, the
month?
13th month is basically just the extension of the end of the year.
So that would be utility bills and stuff like that for
Right,
that. So it's not including any payouts or any things not paid for classroom supplies. That would all be included through the end of June. We would
Yeah,
see
pretty much
that.
they're all ordered by the end of June. So
Okay.
I think.
So
that-
we could
Give you a
see
good
that
snapshot.
almost in real time. Okay.
So can we just clarify the motion? Because I don't think this is the
Thank you. I'll
motion
do this.
anymore.
Patty, how about this? Where's the second?
Tish was the
I was the
second.
second.
Thank you. So I think I want to rescind the motion.
Thank you.
Okay. And I'll make another motion, which is move to, at the time at which we have reporting on what was not.
Might I simplify it?
Please.
Just, can we get at each board meeting through the end of the year and accounting to the best of your ability about what reductions we have made?
Absolutely.
In second.
Well, that's just, that doesn't have to
Is
be a
that
motion.
fair? Do we have any more discussion on this?
So can that just be an agenda item?
Huh?
Yeah, I don't think you have to vote on it. I think I'll just.
Yeah, it'll be
I'll
part of the
provide it.
financial report,
I'll
that
provide it.
that's,
Alright.
so,
So it's a
rescind.
motion, rescind the
Is it a
second.
motion?
yes.
Okay.
Oh, it is a motion.
All right.
Let's vote on it, yeah.
Any
Roll call.
discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
To
before-
provide an accounting of reductions made at each board meeting. Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Blues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claver, Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Passed.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank-
you, Patty.
I know this is really hard to get through, but it's important, and I feel like poor Zach is only halfway through this.
Well, we only have 2 slides left, so we're only a third of the way. So,
Okay. So before we get into it, we're now moving on to fiscal 2027 and looking at proposed cuts that would alter the budget that we already passed for fiscal 2027. So Zach, if we approve this, it would go to the city manager as basically an amendment to that.
right,
more or
which is
less.
always
There's no mechanism for that because we've never been in this
right.
position
So this is a new
before.
thing, but I think the city manager anticipates that the goal was to create a updated, formalized proposal that would replace our last proposal that we finished in February.
Correct.
So, all right.
Good luck.
So we talked about the assistant BA position, the shift to city finance. I was saying this last night, and it continues to be the case. That person will continue to report through that December period. Will continue to report to our BA, just in terms of the flow. So this is actually, it's a big assist from city finance. I think Nathan talked last night about some of the overlap in some of the work. So again, another way in which I think the city is helping us to offset some of these costs. Clerical, I mentioned this last night. So we have an opening that has just occurred at RJLA for the clerical position at RJLA. We are still working through what that's going to mean for this year. I was just having some conversation with Steve today about how we're going to try to kind of pace this together to get us through the rest of the year. But we would not replace that position in FY27. We have, I think I have this number correct, at the moment we have, I believe it is 9 clerical positions at the high school. Those folks all work really hard, but we would end up reallocating one of those folks to TBA about who that's going to be and how we're going to do that. Those are still details to be worked out. But somebody from within that pool of people would be reallocated to Robert J. Lister to serve as the administrative assistant there, and then we would redistribute the duties that were associated with whatever role was lost across the rest. We'd have to remap what we're doing with folks in clerical. That is still, that I will tell you, I know that particular conversation is, I'm sure, is reasonably stress-inducing for a bunch of people who are in those roles, worried that, does this mean I'm switching buildings? To what extent is this going to make my job change? And those are questions that we're going to have to work through, but that is the proposal, that we would not replace that position for FY27 and then redistribute. We took half of one of our PEEP teachers. That's it's our preschool program that is targeted at students with disabilities, but we have, we try to maintain a 1-to-1 ratio of non-identified peers in that preschool that is housed on the side of Little Harbor. One of those roles, we would fund half of that role from a fund where revenues from fees that are paid from families go into a fund that at times has been utilized to take care of some of the physical needs of the space connected with PEEP. This does not wipe out those funds, but it is, so we want to maintain the ability to continue to use that to offset some of those costs, but this would offset half of one of those people. Now, this is one of the things I talked about last night. This is not a structural change. This is one-time money. So we would have, if we were looking to save those funds going forward next year, in FY28, we would have some other conversation. We would have to do something else. But that's what we would do in this case. I mentioned before a central office clerical position that we are phasing out in this proposal, that we would actually phase out at the end of May, and this would be the savings in connection to that position. The two projected enrollment savings that Lee was speaking about before, which I said in terms of Jen's comments, I think this is the most speculative, and I can understand if people have some trepidation around this, but our hope is that we're in a position where we're going to be able to see some of that come back to us through some of the structural changes. The two roles that we added, and we didn't get into the second role last night, but the two roles that we added in this budget, in a position where we're reducing now would be 6.5 total FTEs. The two new roles are both special ed related, directly connected to trying to curb costs over the long run. One is the assistant director position we talked about. Two is the special educator in the RISE position at the middle school, which is the social connected to behavioral and social emotional needs of students on IEPs. So those are the things we're investing in. And so then you have the school board support services. This is the line that we were using to cover strategic planning, and then had and reserved for other needs of the board. We would totally cut that. That, by the way, that completely eliminates that line, just to be transparent. There's no cushion left. Some of the software stuff that we've been able to make some decisions around what we're moving around in IT. Deferred facilities. This is going to be across a lot of different areas. This is not from a single line. This is all over the place. This is one where, we ask Kenny to do Kenny stuff. So that comes across many lines. Superintendent contingency line. This is not a complete elimination of that line. This is the sub line. If you look at the budget, there's a couple of different things that fall under this as a category. One is the money we have to offset the deficit in terms of our food service program, where people have not paid, but we don't have people go without. So we build up payback that we need to do as a district to offset those costs. That lives in the overall category. And the other one, Brian, help me, there's one other thing that's in there.
I got it in front of me here. Hold on, let me just find it. Opportunity fund.
Opportunity fund. So we make a $20,000, is it 20,000? Let's make sure it's right, 25. So also in that category are those two things. So it's the opportunity fund. I think most folks are familiar with this. This has been a longstanding tradition. We roll money into the opportunity fund. This is something that we have that's available to families of need in the district to help offset costs connected to a variety of things, field trips, students at the high school who are unable to take driver's ed. We do a bunch of different things where we use the opportunity fund to offset those costs. This $15,000 piece is not connected to any of those things. Those things stay intact. We continue to budget around those things, but it's just general flexibility around things that can't fall anywhere else, that end up falling into my office. Outside legal services. We talked about this during the budget. The night we had the big budget proposal, we talked about what our spending looks like.
I'm sorry, I don't see that on mine. Oh, never mind. Second page.
So, second page, yep. So we talked about during the budget presentation of the board, the last big night, we mapped out what we pay in outside legal services over the last couple of years. Have been, even as that has grown over time, we're still sub $50,000 in terms of our expenditure of that line. So we have cut back, not all of it. We haven't cut all the way back to what the last year or two has looked like, but we have cut back some of the buffer that we had in that arena. $15,000 cut connected to the ending of expenses in connection with e-finance as we transition into the new accounting system. And we're no longer, contributing to e-finance the same way. Enrichment, again, we hit a second time.
Yep.
And we include the FICA and retirement portions of what we budgeted, because we have to budget for FICA and retirement. So that's an entire line for FY27. Student transportation, part of the savings in student transportation is because as we've tracked what's happened over the past year, there are times where, due to the lack of substitute drivers, we don't have runs go. We are not charged for runs that do not go. This is reflective of what the trend line has been. Brian has recently worked on a new copier contract, which leads us to $10,000 in savings for the upcoming year. IT has worked with the state of New Hampshire to be able to offset some cybersecurity work that they were already planning to do, and they've been able to pick up a grant from the state in order to pay for that. In athletics, we have a bunch of small reductions in a variety of different lines that we think we will, again, none of this is pain free, but we don't think, it's like teams are not going to run. It's not like equipment is not going to be bought, but we'll have to go without in some areas, in some ways. City IT position, again, in ongoing conversations, is that continues to not be spent. I think we have we have an agreement that we can anticipate some savings back for this upcoming year in relation to that position, somewhat regardless of when that gets hired or if it gets hired. And there might be more if that continues to be a position that does not get hired. And then we're just pulling from a bunch of different operational lines to put together a hodgepodge of stuff that we think we can skim a total of $5,000 from. So that combination of items gets you to, this particular set of things gets you to that $565,000. Combined with the work from 26 that you just passed, that would get us to 983, approximately 983 in terms of our assistance to the city. Not assistance because they're carrying some load too. So it's a combination of our collective portion of what we're trying to do in relation to health insurance, and this part is the 26.2% in FY27. So.
Thank you. So I'd like to make, before we have any discussion, I'd like to make a motion to pass the cuts to fiscal 2027 as recommended by the superintendent.
Second.
Thank you. Now, any discussion, Byron?
My only question I have on this is, and maybe this is 26 too, but what I'm trying to understand is, oftentimes we go into the budget season, we talk about like a target 3-4%, whatever.
Yeah.
So for the items that are on here that are one time, and they're not structural,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
How does that roll into those percent increases in the following years? Does that make sense?
You
as a
would,
question?
you would start at a lower level.
You would start at a lower level.
Well, if we look, we would.
If those come back in, it would look potentially higher.
And I think one of the conversations too is, I think we can have some discussion, because I think the finance committee and some of the conversations, but the whole point of some of the dialogue was, how do we start to build, the budget, this is a little tangential, but the budget, the format of the budget document that you've received has basically been the same exact format for 2 decades. And so I appreciate what the finance committee part of the conversation was. And I think, Byron, it came out of the dialogue at the end of the first proposal where you said, this idea of going forward, I need to be able to see multiple years of actuals. I want to see budgets. I want to see actuals. I want to see those types of things, which I think I've indicated before in previous districts. So that's kind of how the stuff operated. As I've rolled in here, and as Brian has rolled in, we've just adopted what has been the process. So I think the starting position of that next budget season, I think we could, it would be what we budgeted from the previous year and how much are we up from the previous budget. So this is broadly, it took me forever to get there. Yes, this would bring us back down, and everything we add back in would potentially be, you're asking for more money. So I think we might want to have a conversation with the city.
Yeah.
Saying, and that's why part of the reason at the end of the presentation last night, I plugged.
Right.
Some of this is one-time funds.
Right.
Based on an extreme situation in a single year. I think our dialogue would want to be not starting from this, what we would say is an artificially depressed floor in our FY28 budget season. So I think it's something to note, and I just think it's something we should bring back or in that dialogue.
I think that's my understanding. I just wanted to clarify. So
Yep. Sorry, I went around
No,
the neighborhood twice on that one.
So we had several people who were not at the work session last night. Is anyone who was missing last night have questions that they'd like to ask before we dive in with everybody else again? Alrighty. Anyone else?
So
Lee.
I'm sorry, I did have a question. Was it clear as to the impact to our students because I know we can do this in a quantitative manner, but from a qualitative manner, was there any discussion about that?
Last night, Lee?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think
No.
those conversations naturally gravitate towards numbers, percentages, averages, and in that is lost the kind of the narrative of what does this mean on the ground? And when we do it, I think we we grossly summarize, you know, what the impact's going to be, because in some ways, some of it we can anticipate, some of it we can't. There's going to be clunkiness that we don't totally anticipate where the squeeze is going to occur. But I would say I never walk out of those conversations and those types of meetings like we had last night feeling like we adequately described what it means. You know, nor is it really set up in a way that allows that to happen effectively sometimes. And that's not a criticism of folks. I think it's just hard to do when we're as big an operation as we are, and we're taking care of kids. It's hard to be to talk about all the little things that this will impact, and what those little things, how some of those little things could be really life-changing for individual kids.
Yeah, and it's part of why, even from a standpoint of stating that we need you to bring back information about, you know, cost cuts that were unexpected to the board in a quantitative manner.
Yeah.
Doesn't really even still paint the picture for us. So,
Yeah.
no, thank you,
That's
I
fair.
appreciate that.
Other questions or comments? Nancy?
I'm scared to death of the out-of-district tuition cuts.
Yep.
I understand in the FY '26, that appears to be money that's gonna be left over. But in this budget, I just don't know how we can have that cut, because
Yeah.
what if we need that money? What if students require that money? I don't know how you can project that money is not gonna be necessary. So I guess I would like to make a friendly amendment that we add that 100,000 back in, and instead of having the cut of 565, we have 465. I just don't know how we can cut that out without knowing definitely what the need is gonna be.
I think it's like I said before, I think that's those as a block, I think are the most speculative item that we've presented to you. So I think it's reasonable to question that, and back to Lee's comment, if it is that speculative, to what extent it creates a negative incentive for us to take action that we might not take in some other situation.
Tish?
If we go with the friendly amendment and add that back in, we're still within the frame that the city was looking for, and we're still protecting the special ed department.
So I guess I made the motion, and I want to be cooperative with that, but I just still fall back on, we presented this to the council last night, and we had an opportunity in that dialogue to speak to these numbers and telegraph the possibility that we might remove some of them, and we didn't do that. So it would be concerning to me, for the same reason as the other question, if we reduce this, then are we risking some other piece of our budget? And we probably are, would be my guess. So I agree, it's entirely possible it would take one student and not that many serious needs to go through those numbers pretty quickly. And it's obviously mandated services that we have to provide. But I also think that if we are going to the council and saying we stand by adding a new administrative position to start to look at this, that we have to at least have the intention in here that we want to try to hit that goal. And I think if we can't hit that goal, then, I mean, that could happen, but that could happen in any budget year.
That's true.
So that's not different from this year or the budget we already passed. Like, it takes one kid not even needing that much before that budget is completely out of whack with what we projected. So, like, I really appreciate the spirit of it, but I guess I wouldn't do it as a friendly
I guess I didn't
amendment.
understand that that was an option for us last night, because in my opinion, the board should say that, not just, I shouldn't have just raised my hand and said that without having the whole board agree to that. So I was not under the impression that that was part of the meeting last night, that we could change this. I knew we were meeting tonight,
Yeah.
and that's when I thought we were gonna, like we are, discussing how we could make changes.
And as
So-
you're saying that now, I agree with you, Nancy. I think that that was a fail on my part to perhaps not figure out how to account for that in the process. I mean, we had a request from the mayor to do this meeting, and my initial response was, well, it doesn't make sense for us to meet after we've already voted, because then what are we doing? We're relitigating the vote. But then, of course, now you're raising a very fair point, which is the flip side of meeting with them before we vote, is then if we want to do something other than what we presented, then we have a bit of a problem. I don't think there was an ideal timing for that meeting. And I felt like when the request came to us, I wanted to try to honor the request, to be collaborative with them and transparent with them. But I totally take your point. I just don't know at this moment how to unring the bell, so to speak. I think you're right. I think that was perhaps an oversight in planning that I should own. And I don't know if there would have been a better way to do it, but we're here, so I guess,
Can I just
Yes,
add something
sir.
to that, just to put it in perspective? Next year, just tuition, not transportation, but just out-of-district tuition, we budgeted $3.1 million. So if we cut off 100,000, I'm still at $3 million. And we do build a little bit of wiggle room in there because we do have move-ins and move-outs. So I don't think it would be a painful cut if we did that, but I also think that we have other areas that we can take that from, if in the event that we needed that $100,000. And I don't think it would be painful, considering a budget size of about $75 million, close to $75 million.
other discussion?
You've got Lee.
Lee?
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying, Lisa, in terms of the $100,000 in out-of-district placement. I think I'd like to hear, Brian, you say something more about where that could come from, because what you're essentially saying is in 2 years, you're going to have invested in programming such that you're able to actually reduce the tuition cost because of the fact that you are now either not putting somebody out of district because you have appropriate programming, or you're pulling somebody back into district because you have appropriate programming. Programming isn't going to happen overnight, and there's a cost associated with that.
Yeah, I think the new position that we're hiring for in special ed, I think is going to find us some efficiencies. And the one thing I brought up last night with City Council is just a small snippet of what can be done, and it's done to an extent. But somebody who's hands-on with all these out-of-district placements is the amount of days that some of these out-of-district placements go to their out-of-district school. They don't always go 180 days. A lot of them are sick or have other issues, and maybe they do 160 days. And we don't usually, for some of these schools, we're not paying for those days that they're not there. But tracking it can be difficult. We have somebody doing it now that's doing it very well, but I think our new person will probably end up finding us that as a small efficiency that we can find. Not to the tune of $100,000, but I think it's a pretty good chunk of change that we would have. I mean, that's just one small example of some of the efficiencies that we would have with this new position. And I think, matching them up with but I'm sure Dan can speak better on this, but matching them up with a program that really fits their needs versus just somebody who has an opening. That's some of the challenges you see too. And sometimes we're just stuck between a rock and a hard place and what it costs for them to get there. And they raise their rates every year too. So, does that answer it, Lee?
It sheds a little bit more light on it, sure.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? So I think before we vote, I will just say, Nancy, you're right. I feel like I hope we are never in this position again, because this has been a fairly miserable process for everyone, and nobody takes pleasure in taking the votes that we're taking tonight. We're here to serve kids. We're here to support our staff. This doesn't do that in the way that we would want. So I apologize. I don't know if I can see a better way to have stepped those out, but you're right. And I think as we're continuing to try to do more joint work sessions with the council, perhaps we can do a little bit more thoughtful conversation about the sequencing of that so that we don't get in this position in the future. So I will own that. And with that, perhaps call for, did you have something else you wanted to say?
I just want to say one more thing before voting, and I don't, my intent is not to be perceived as like city staff cheerleader and taker of money from departments, but I'm so appreciative of the work that city staff have done with us through this, because they could have said what a counselor said last night, cover the 1.5, you guys figured out, it's your problem. They could have done some other stuff, and they haven't. They could have said, after that night, they could have said, we don't know how much we're going to ask you to, we're going to ask for you to contribute, and therefore you need to tell all teachers that they may not have a job next year. And that was a decision city management staff made to say, we're going to allow that to slide by April 1, to slide by without pushing out those things. And they could have not said that. And right now we could be in the midst of, instead of having this conversation, walking into a city process, we're really confused about what the outcome might be, and everybody in the district is filling out these forms based on the contract to say, what have you done for us lately? And we're scoring people. Everybody's trying to figure out whether or not they need to start looking for another job. And the council, well, the city management staff said, we don't need you to do that. We will go, you help us do these hard things, and we will go to bat for you with the city council to say you've done your bit. So I don't want to lose track of that. While we are doing something really awful right now, it could be way more awful than what we're doing at the moment. And we could be having, could be at a much lower point. And so I'm really thankful for all of you to be sticking in there and hanging in and doing the work. And I'm thankful for the collaboration we had with city management staff this time around. So.
No, I think that is important. And I think the night that they voted, we definitely had that concern that we could be here, and we, I think, rightly prioritize people as our top priority. And we knew when we did that there would be some hard choices that would follow on after that. So we're here.
I'm not going to vote for it again, but I do want to thank, I know, Lisa, you worked really hard with the city. Obviously, Zach, Patty, all of our administrators, our principals, Dan, I know you all work so hard, and I certainly appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody else here does. I know that you all put a lot of time and effort and love into this to try to get the best budget for us, so thank you.
Tish.
Can I just say I really appreciate the conversation we've had tonight over this, the discussion, the explanations of things. It definitely gives me a clearer picture, and I'm sure the community too, at how hard everyone has worked on this, and the sacrifices the schools are making. We see it, we appreciate it. We hope we never have to be here again. But thank you. I do really appreciate this discussion tonight.
Jen.
I'm just wondering, does this, like how we're worried about teachers not getting supplies, do we see that being a future for this next budget, or no?
No, wasn't included in this.
Okay, just if certain line items didn't happen, like the out-of-district tuition, where would we get that from?
I mean, if we didn't do that, we'd find other lines. I couldn't say which one, but we wouldn't affect supplies for next year. That's not the goal at all. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, what would it affect?
I will have to go through,
depends.
and depends where we flow during the course of the year. Sometimes things come in under budget, sometimes they come in over budget. We would find a place at that particular time. It's very difficult to say before the year
I think though, as our finance committee is continuing to work on sort of shifting how we present the budget, and we're moving more towards potentially getting actuals and having that down the line, we should have more visibility into that, and we always have the ability as a board, if we're concerned about something that is a trend line in there, to have that discussion. So it wouldn't necessarily be a situation where something is going, for the entire year and we're not, having eyes on it or having an opportunity to have that discussion. But I do think, in any year that we're passing any budget, there's always something that changes, and especially with out-of-district special education, it's just highly variable. And, I guess, I agree with you, I'd love to have that certainty, but I would say we never have that certainty, even in a normal budget year, of exactly what things are going to look like 3 or 6 months from now, because needs shift and things are unpredictable.
Yeah, and
To
we
some
try to
extent.
prioritize certain things, but
Yeah.
there's so many variables. Once we hit that point, let's say instead of this, we had a student move to the district, the student has is in a $150,000 placement, we would need to go figure out how are we covering it in a year where we didn't budget for it. And the decisions that we would make about how to offset that cost would depend on, and I think Brian was speaking to it, in that moment, do we have things that are like, oh, great, this other thing came in $25,000 under where we thought, great, we're grabbing that money, that's going to cover that. This thing came in, and that's what would happen. It would be situational specific. And so it's not that we're trying to dodge what that plan B is. It's the plan B is somewhat is specific to the moment and all the other variables that we can't control for. So,
And those are the regular conversations that me and Zach have when
a lot.
something says we cost something. Where can we find it? Well, you know what? We came up short on this. I have some extra money. You can have it. Or we're going to pull from 2 or 3 different places, and that's where we're going to go. How we're going to go. But I also want to set expectations that I don't know if just between political climate and the way the budgets have gone and schools as general, I don't know if we can ever have a normal budget year at any time in the near future. I think the new normal is the fact that it's not normal. So I think every year there's going to be some type of major challenge. So I just want to kind of, manage expectations in that, and that's for any district.
Yeah, what was the normal year I had here?
I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that, and that next year is going to be totally
Well, that's what I thought this
straightforward.
year was going to be, and
I know.
I haven't had a normal year yet. So.
All right. Any other last words? Well, I'm going to thank everyone up here for all the hard work. I know that this has been a really even more brutal than usual budget process. I don't think any of us take pleasure in approving what we're considering right now. But with that, I will ask for the roll call vote.
Motion is to recommend to pass the cuts as recommended by the superintendent for fiscal year '27. Jen Shump,
Yes.
Pip Blues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Clayberg,
No.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
No.
7-2 passes.
Thank you. All right, so I'm looking at the time.
I was just going to make a motion to suspend the rules.
I was also going to, but go ahead.
Okay, I would like to move to suspend the rules to move to new business A and B before we.
I would second that, and that's what I was
Policies.
going to suggest. Thank you. We need to do a roll call vote on that, though. So we have a roll call vote to suspend the rules and move up A and B under new business.
It's a 2/3 vote. Rule suspension.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Blues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow. That's right. Say yes.
From the cheap seats.
Say yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Clayberg,
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, back to you, Zach.
Okay, you have a list of recommended renomination for administrators. These are folks on continuing contracts through conversations with their supervisors or recommended for that. Folks have either been evaluated and those evaluations are complete, or they're far enough along where we know what the outcome of those evaluations will be in terms of having those folks continue. So this is your list of folks and the locations. It includes both the base salary, which is what we have included in the past for folks. It's the CBA base salary for folks. Total salary is also a reflection of the other elements for them, which include degree attainment and longevity.
Motion to approve the administrator contracts as recommended.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
Sorry, struggling with the mute button there. Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
passed.
Thank you. All right. Next up,
So then you have a slate of folks for approval. I'm going to hold one of those. I'm going to hold the last one, the assistant director, out. I'm hoping that the rest can be approved as a slate. I do want to have both Dan Alexander and Kate Callahan, who thought she was coming for the first 25 minutes of the meeting and got this instead. So 10 points for Kate. And to speak to the kind of the role and the process of identifying the candidate. But the other ones we've had some conversation about, all replacements for existing positions, and all folks, multiple folks who are rolling over into new spots that we've had. And just the first, the PMS science teacher being new to the new district. So.
motion to approve the science teacher at PMS, the one-year fourth grade teacher, I'm not sure where.
Dondero.
I can't read. The fifth grade teacher at New Franklin and the fourth grade teacher at, I don't know.
That's New
Dondero.
Franklin.
I does not read. Okay,
Franklin.
thank you. Can I have a second, assuming I got
Second.
all those schools right? Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
I vote yes for 4, but I vote no for a grade 5 teacher.
Well, then, hold on, Steve. So we have to vote as a block. So procedurally, if you'd like to pull out one, can we unwind this, Patty, just because I think Steve didn't know that. So
Yep.
Steve, what we would do
Yep.
normally, if you
Procedural.
want to pull one out, when we're saying that we're going to take them as a block and I make the motion, you say, I'd like to pull this one out of the block.
I didn't-
So we'll say you said that, and which one did you pull out?
The fifth grade teacher.
Fifth grade teacher. Okay, so I'm going to rescind my motion and make a new motion to approve the science teacher, the one-year fourth grade teacher, and the other fourth grade teacher. Can I have a
And I
second on
second.
that? Any discussion on just those three? Roll call vote on just those three, please.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Meadow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
And
Yes.
Nancy's walking back
Nancy
in.
Claiberg,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. Okay, so can I have a motion now to consider the fifth grade teacher at New Franklin?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Discussion. Roll call vote, please, Patty.
Jen Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
No.
Byron Meadow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
8-1.
So now I will make a motion to approve the Assistant Director of Student Services. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion, maybe I'll turn it over to you first, or whoever
Great.
else would like to speak at this time.
No, I had asked, I'll
With our
have.
apologies for making you sit here for 3
No,
hours.
that's all right. So Dan had already asked Dan to come because of the amount of time we ended up taking last night talking about this. It wasn't a meeting about this, but it ended up, so I thought it was worthy of having additional information for the public about, again, the position, why we believe in the position. I know the board believes in the position because we've eliminated other stuff in our proposal, but I think it's important for the public to hear, what is the why. And then second, then what was the process we went through to identify the candidate and why do we feel this is the right candidate? And I know then I'd also want to make sure, maybe in terms of the why, maybe we go why,
Sure.
include Kate after, because I know Kate had approached me about wanting to speak to the why from the perspective of principal, and then after that, process
Sure.
and him.
So the why, first, the out-of-district coordinator position, as Zach kind of alluded to last night and talked about, it's been kind of a remote position. That person does not come into our district more than a couple of days a month. They live on the other side of the state. In my role, it's made it challenging to interact with that person and really, kind of go through the processes we need to go through. So that position is going to be wrapped into this one. The assistant director will take on that role. So that will be half of their job, is to work with our current families that are out of district, students, get to know them, get to know the families, as well as starting to look at the development of the programs and the programs we already have in district. We do have programs already existing at a high school and a middle school, and we need to work on some at our elementary school, as well as the RISE teacher, which I think was approved or being approved. I'm sorry, I kind of lost track tonight, to help streamline those programs, make sure we're being as effective as we can, and get to know those programs and help develop those programs so that when we have families that are currently have their child out of district, we're able to articulate effectively what those programs are, how we can support their child coming back to district, be part of the Portsmouth community, so that we can meet the child's needs. That is my goal, is to meet every child's needs, regardless of what they are, and how can we do that the most effectively so they're community members of our community. It breaks my heart as administrator for all the years I've been to watch a student get on a bus and go out of state to a placement that's over an hour away, and then come back and all their friends are going in for dinner because they're returning so late in the evening. How can we do that better? That's really the goal of what this position is, to help incorporate and work collaboratively in doing that. And there's a lot we need to continue to develop in Portsmouth, and I know that when I first started talking about this, some of the things came up about what are we going to do about all the other students. We haven't talked about that. I want to talk about that. Those are things that I want to do. I've been working with Zach and Patty about some literacy training for some of our special ed teachers that will take place, and some availability we have so that we can get all of our special ed teachers with a good basis for literacy training to help support our students as well. So there's a lot of different roles and things that we need to take on, as well as adding ELL, school counseling, and nursing into the student services roles, so we're all encompassing to support the students. I envision that as quarterly meetings, some annual meetings of the entire student services. So there is no breakdown or communication loss when a student needs something in any of those areas, and bring them together. And I think last night, and I'll have Kate come up, there was talk about, well, why would we just pass that money on to case managers? And you have these coordinators. Coordinators are special ed teachers. I don't want to use the term case manager. I'm not going to use that again. I'm going to use special ed teacher, because that is their role, and that's what they do in the schools, is they carry a caseload. They work with students, they're in classrooms, and the coordinator stipend they receive, I wouldn't say, and Kate, you want to come on up and talk about how, from a principal role, you have to, work with your coordinator on a lot too, is they're doing a lot of that work after school. So to just say we're going to pass that back to case managers would overtax them. And I think, as I said last night too, our principals are expected to do a lot every given day. So this is also to support them on a daily basis with the needs they have in the school. So,
Kate, we have a quick bit of housekeeping to do because we have an arcane rule that forbids us to continue past 10. You're welcome. We're going to suspend it for you, hopefully, since you've sat here all this time. But
Suspend the rules and go 10:30.
Sure, why not?
And that was a big
Thanks, Byron. I will second that. And take a roll call vote, please, Patty, with our apologies.
All right, going to 10:30. Jennifer Shump.
Yes.
Booz.
No.
Stephen Adler.
Yes.
Byron Maddow.
Yes.
Brian French.
No.
Lisa Rappaport.
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell.
No.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Did we do it? 2/3 we need?
6-3. Oh, yeah. Just barely.
All right, so
Oh, we
we're
did,
there.
okay.
We're over the
All
finish
right.
line.
Talk fast, people.
I can talk really fast.
Okay, please,
After
no,
10:30.
we're not
After
trying to rush
10:30.
you, we just have this procedural thing.
So I think a big piece of why I'm here is listening to the conversation last night. I just wanted to clear some things up for all of you, but also for the public. So from my perspective as an administrator, there was a lot of conversations about not needing this person. And so I was thinking more along the lines of my need for Dan in many situations where I'm not able to make some of those decisions because I don't have that special ed background. I lean on a special ed teacher who is given a $5,000 stipend, who has 8 to 10 kids, depending on who stays in the school at a given time, every single day. And so when she's having to go to a 2-hour meeting yesterday, that means she's either giving up IEP hours for service delivery so that she can be present at an important meeting that's just as important for that other family's child as it is for those kids who need services, or another case manager and or a sub is coming in to service those students. And so putting the demand back onto somebody who is a teacher, she's not a classroom teacher, she's a special ed teacher, is not at all acceptable in my mind. I also think about the conversations that my belief is that we're here for every student, regardless of an address and regardless of a disability. And so when we talk at times when they're like, Kate, we need to wave the red flag, this is impossible. We don't have the services to do X, Y, and Z. So I'm not thinking necessarily about one population, say our kids with autism. I'm looking at some of those kids from an emotional standpoint. And so I know that Dan spoke to the middle and high school having some of those programs and systems in place, but from an elementary standpoint, that's one of our biggest areas of weakness. We don't have the right system, so we're relying on paraprofessionals to get additional training to work with some of our most challenging students. And I truly believe after this year of having some of those kids in our class with the right people assigned to them, with the right amount of training, really because I've driven him crazy, that we've been able to keep those kids here. Years prior, it would have been, I need help, we can't do this, and therefore we'd be looking at programs. And those programs might not be the program that's the best fit for that student, but it's a program that has a vacancy. And so I truly believe that if we have a person who can work alongside Dan, Dan can still oversee all of that, but some of the work that we've talked about, from bringing people back in, but also spending time in the elementary schools, looking at those needs across 3 buildings, trying to unify that to one, that person can come in, be, hands-on, boots on the ground, give us some feedback, help us think about what we need to do differently. Does that, in some instances, maybe need to look at one school houses X population, another school houses this population, and the third school does this. That's not something that somebody can do and manage special ed at the same time as a district of 6 schools, because there's a whole other piece in and of itself, and put all this work in motion. And so I just wanted that to be really clear. It hurt me to hear that, we can just have a case manager do this, or we can just have a special ed teacher do this, because really in the end the kids suffer. It's not the adults who suffer, it's those kids who have an IEP, who need those hours, who have specialized instruction to get what they need, that are now being compromised so that they can make a phone call, ask those questions. And I think the other big piece is they can't sign off, nor can I sign off on giving those funds away. I can't go to an IEP meeting and say, Zach needs X, Y, and Z. I'm going to call this school and X amount of dollars is going to go there. That all starts from me going to him, who goes up to Zach. And so when you talk about the budget, I think that's an important piece that was presented by community members that is false. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone here knew that and be an advocate for what the 3 elementary schools need, and really what our students need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
I think from the beginning, when we started talking about this, we always talked about this being a team process, right? And if we don't have programming that parents want their child to come back, and I can tell you I've sat in meetings and that is the case, then we're gonna keep those students out of our community. So it's creating that opportunity for those students, so those parents are sitting at that meeting wanting their child to be back part of the Portsmouth School Department. That's my goal, that really is, to get those students back if we can. And then, like Kate said, developing that programming. Moving on to who the candidate is in the process. The process, you sent it out, formulated a committee. I purposely left the superintendent, assistant superintendent off the committee because they would be the final interview and choice. We received 6 applications. 2 of which were not certified in the state of New Hampshire. So 4 candidates moved forward, were offered interviews. Only 3 out of 4 took them. The committee met, interviewed the candidates. The committee had an overwhelming choice, and when I say that, I did step away on that piece because I did know one of the candidates and had worked with the candidate, but I believe one of the people on the committee said, can he start tomorrow? I said, no, we gotta wait, do this process. From there, those coordinators who were unable to make the interview process, we took the final candidate, gave them an opportunity to have a Zoom interview with them. Any reluctancy or concerns that they had, some of the comments they put out there was this person's way overqualified for this position. I think one was joking that they should replace me. I didn't like that comment personally, but that's okay. But no, I think that, they then gave the opportunity to the coordinators to call references because I knew some of the references, and they reported back that they had positive references. The candidate moved on to the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and I think they felt extremely strong that this is a great candidate. This is a person who has a background in administration, teaching, currently is, can I say all of this, or am I getting too far down? Okay. Currently acting as an assistant director of special education in one of the largest cities in New Hampshire right now, as well as still acting in the role as a principal of a specialized school like Lister, and the fully integrated preschool, which services about 300 students every day. So that person is doing a dual role right now within that community. The specialized school that person started out in their current role had 8 students in it, and currently they were able to help grow that to 40 students. So they have a background in growing programs and looking at what students need. That community also has a lot of in-district programming, so it's looking at how to be effective with that. As I said, they've served in the role of out-of-district coordinator. They were a special education teacher. They're currently certified in special education, and as a principal, as an administrator, a strong background for evaluating staff and supporting staff. So am I concerned this person's overqualified? Yeah, but I think that we'll have a great working relationship, and they're going to bring a lot to our community and really help support what we're trying to do and where we're trying to move in the future. So I appreciate Kate actually called me to come tonight. I did not ask her to come. She called me after last night. So I don't know if there's any questions you folks have further about that.
Well, I'd just say from our end that we were impressed with the candidate. Felt very optimistic that it's going to kind of land where we want to land, and this whole, in terms of what we put forward, and I think the board's kind of process this year. This is a response to what we did last year, where there was concern about what are we going to do to because of the increase. Last year's crisis was out of district spending on tuitions. So what are we going to do in order to curb that work? So even while we were doing all this other reducing, we kept our eyes on that concern, identified from at least in part the city council, and did 2 things that are both connected to this work. One is this position that we're talking about, and 2 is the return of the bringing of the RISE position at the middle school. That is what this year has been about, is about commitment to those kind of concepts that is twofold. It's two-pronged. It's the there's the financial piece, but it's more importantly the ethical piece of making sure our kids have the ability to stay in our schools and be in their neighborhood schools. And like Dan said, at the end of the day, when they're done at 2:30, 3 o'clock, they go get to play with their friends after school. They're not on a bus coming back from 128 someplace, and that's been the goal. And this stuff is it's the coming together of all that conversation and work. And I think we're lucky we got the candidate that we got to step into that role. So.
Any other questions or discussion? Nancy?
It sounds like you had a real comprehensive and complete process to find this person, and I think we all appreciate that. I know you put a lot into it, and it sounds like this is a great candidate for us.
I just felt vetting was important to make sure that, you know, people had the opportunity to ask the questions they needed to and meet the folks that were important.
Tish?
I also want to thank you for giving a little bit more detail of this job description, and Kate, your needs. You worded it so perfectly of what is needed. You know, I worked in special ed. I loved it. I miss it. But I saw students on a bus for an hour and a half. That's 3 hours a day. And then sitting in school for 6 hours. They didn't have time, as you said, to play. That keeping the kids in district is that's the ultimate goal. And I do think that this position is a step towards that. So thank you for the hard work, for the work put into finding the right candidate. I really appreciate that.
I think, Tish, one of the big pieces too for this candidate that was a big takeaway from me is the experience both as an administrator, as a principal, but also from a special ed standpoint, and just also looking at how we can lean into him as administrators to learn from him. But one of the pieces during the interview process was recognizing that every teacher has a really hard job, but our paraprofessionals and our special ed teachers have a really hard job, but also have a legal commitment. Mm-hmm. And so that language resonated with me because it's not just going into the classroom. There's always that piece of what we have to do right by law and making sure we're following that. And so thinking about the increase in students we've had over the course of just the past 5 years, who are identified coming to us starting in kindergarten and are identified in those early years of K1 and 2, it's important, I think, to have somebody who can be in the buildings more frequently. And not that that's a diss on Dan, but it's not a reality. And so I think that partnership is important. I think the other piece that we're not talking about that will be incorporated into this position is our ELL students. We just enrolled our 40th student at Dondero, who is an active ELL student. And I don't have the exact number, but this is a person who speaks no English. So they started this week. And so when I also think about those increase in numbers, that's something that we, I think, internally talk about, we don't externally talk about. And so that's a shift in Portsmouth in my 16 years of being here, to have that many students just in one building, and thinking about those systems. And so some of those students will need the additional support from a language standpoint, but we're also finding that they have the needs from a special ed perspective. And so having somebody in the trenches to work through that process, because again, there's a legality to it, is also going to be super helpful in not only educating the teachers, but also supporting parents.
Kate, to put that into perspective, out of those 40 kids, what's the total number of students at Dondero?
342, and tomorrow will be, actually no, because we had one leave today and one tomorrow. So we'll have 342 students.
Yeah, so out of that number, 40 are ELL students. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I can't do the percentage in my head, but
It's a lot.
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's after 10, so I can't do
We
that.
know. With that, any other questions or discussion? I want to thank you both for, I know this is probably not the ideal night for you to wait all night for us to get to this, and we apologize, but very much appreciate the dedication that you put into supporting our kids and supporting us through this budget process. We really, literally couldn't do it without you, so thank you. And with that, can we have a roll call vote to approve, I've already forgotten the job title, Assistant Director of Student Services.
Jennifer Shum?
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Definitely.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claybird, Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
Absolutely.
approved.
Thank you both so
Thank
much.
you.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
So, given the time, I believe we are going to table policies, table the discussion of general assurances. I would like to do a 30-second preview of the board retreat and maybe a minute on committee updates with everybody's indulgence. And then we still must return to public comment, but we will try to be as brief as we can. Eric, thank you, and our apologies for the hour.
Thank you, Eric.
All right, so for the board retreat, May 12th, 6 p.m., watch your inbox. We will be sending out some materials hopefully by the end of this week to give you a sense of the agenda, and there will be some homework where we will be asking for feedback from everybody on the board with the intention of centering the discussion around the issues that you raise as much as possible ahead of time. We will be setting goals for the board for the upcoming year, having some discussions, big picture, about what issues we might wish some of our major committees, like policy, finance, and facilities, to focus their work on, just so they have the whole board somewhat weighing in on that. We may, if time permits, have some other conversations, but we also need to discuss some strategic business planning for the upcoming, 2 to 3 year period, to try to look at what we can do to improve our budget process and to improve our ability to be responsive to all of the various cross currents that we're managing in education and in our community right now. So I will follow up further on that. For committee updates, all of the minutes are linked. I know, Brian, you had something that you did want to speak to briefly. And before you do that, I just want to say just a little bit of housekeeping. Minutes for all of our committees, we do want to make sure that the committee chairs, if there's a board chair, have eyes on those minutes before they're posted. And if there's not a board member who's chairing that committee, if we can try to the fullest extent possible to have at least 1 or 2 board members eyeball those minutes before they're posted. If that's not possible, we can certainly post abbreviated draft minutes and then update that post later with more full minutes once people have time to review. We don't want to be out of compliance with RSA, but we also want to make sure that our minutes fully reflect the conversations that we're having before they're posted. And with that, Brian, I know you had a little bit that you wanted to add for committee updates.
Just on the superintendent evaluation committee, I think we have a proposed timeline in here. We're probably going to shift it just slightly. I'm going to meet with Nancy and Lee as soon as we can, hopefully this week, maybe the end of the week or beginning of next week, to just adjust the timeline a little bit. But basically what we had decided on, there was some discussion about using maybe outside services possibly, or looking at some other tools. But in light of all the budget stuff that we're talking about, we're like, well, let's take a look at what we have. And honestly, when we look through it, I think a lot of the things that we ask about in the surveys, when we talk to the board members and do the 360s, that we are really ticking a lot of the boxes for a lot of the things. And to be honest with you, when this was first developed, it was it used the SBA rubric. A lot of that stuff is still applicable. And also we found some value in sort of looking at some trends over the last, we've used it for 2 years, and looking at this year. One of the things that we want to, I wanted to take a little more time, is there's 2 sections in the beginning of that survey. Last 2 years has been identical, but the 3rd section has been around board goals and also talking about the strategy of the district. Those goals have been kind of solidified, so we need to kind of discuss on what we're going to make sure that we hold account, the execution of that strategic plan, and that most of those questions are around just, just the rollout of the implementation, but now we're really in the execution phase. So I think, but the first two sections we're keeping pretty much the same.
Thank you. And we do have, I believe in your contract, we have to complete that process by June 1st?
I think it's just during the month of June.
Month of June. Okay, that's better for us.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So in the interest of time, I think the rest of the committee updates we'll say are in the packet and linked, and if people have questions, reach out. And I will reopen public comment for anyone who would like to come up. If you do, I believe you know the drill, but state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes. And our apologies for the late hour, Esther.
I'm used to it. Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. I guess I just want to state a couple things. First, there were some meeting minutes that were presented. So far, there's been no explanation to particularly the 40 teachers that are in question. There were a lot of things in those meeting minutes. And as a citizen, I'm hoping that we get some explanation to why it happened. If it's not accurate, it sounds like there might be some question there when you ask people to review meeting minutes. But I think you owe the citizenry some explanations for some of the things in there. I did bring forward my concerns with Medicaid, special ed aid, incoming funds. So I have to ask, what happened there? What's going on? I also think that tonight you were worried about pencils and markers and glue sticks, and yet you were willing to add another administrator. And not only do you have the director of student service for Portsmouth, but you have sending district director of student services people. You have one out of Rye. You have a coordinator out of Greenland. You have a lot of resources. Because remember, they take care of their own kids. You have 1,480 some kids, probably a few more tonight listening to the principal, that are Portsmouth kids. And I guess I'm really having a hard time, and I understand what the principal's saying about coordinators, but I said give them some extra money and give them a little bit more stuff, maybe take some of their caseload away, get another case manager, because those are the people that are on the front of things. They're the people in the schools. They're the people that are going to really know the difference. They're going to make a difference. Those are the people the principal will have connection with. So I guess I'm really kind of saddened that we went down that direction instead of people that have feet on the ground. And, again, for a district this size, the way I look at it is you have 3 special ed directors before you even hire this one, because you have all the sending directors. And I guess my question is, did you get input from them as part of this conversation? Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Teacher Huda, Portsmouth. So as I sat here tonight and listened to the budget discussion, for me, having done this for quite a while, the points that kept on coming back were the non-clarity of where you are making your so-called cuts and how you're adjusting everything, that the board did not know where or what cost centers you were doing that to. So I noticed that quite a few of your members requested that, and it would have been a lot clearer for me as a resident and taxpayer, and also for your board members, if you had what you had before, the adjustments you were making, and then what the end was. It's 3 columns, it's pretty straightforward, and by the cost center or the school. by the listing that you get every month. Something to say, where is this? Because I heard Pip ask, I heard Byron ask. It's a simple form. Every other department does this. And I urge you, request this information. It's available. Every other department does this in the city. So I think the discussion was lengthy, and it didn't have to be, because the information is not being provided, and you have it. And another thing that kind of went back to my my budgeting days is when the superintendent referred to the different way they do budgets here and providing the actuals, and he did that in his previous job. If you came here and it's been done this way for 20 years, it doesn't mean it's right, and it didn't mean it's compliant with the RSAs. So I urge you, change things to serve your board. Thank you.
Well, we're 9 minutes early, but I would entertain
motion
a
to
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
do we need a roll call vote?
I don't
Did we
think
already
so.
lose Lee?
Is he on here? Lee, you good
No,
to
I'm still
adjourn?
there. I'm good.
You're welcome, Lee.
I gotta
Okay,
get a
adjourned.
prep for the conference. Thanks.